Part 54. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 554. Although this G3A3 is not equipped with any sights, 4K LAN, the most basic machine sight alone is enough to make this gun a weapon for harvesting heads within a range of 200 meters. What's more, after entering the game, he still has a trump card that he has never used. That is time stops. Battle of Mogadishu, as a VR game, does not allow players to pause during the game except at save points. In order to prevent players from facing enemies, they first turn on the pause, and then use the gun-shaped handle to freely move in the real world for preview. Thinking of this, Kaylan couldn't help but want to do a test. He slowly aimed the crosshair at a ranger who had just fired an M72 rocket launcher and retracted behind the barricade 200 meters away, and then turned on time stop. An unexpected scene happened for Kaylan. In the time stop state, not only the game screen turned into black and white, but the modeling of those characters also had obvious bugs. Many NPC joints and bone penetrations. It penetrated the skin, muscles, and internal organs, and the blood that was about to splash out was frozen in place. The flame gas spattered by the explosion of the bullet primer drilled directly out of the wall of the barrel, and the blood flew everywhere on the battlefield. The bullets created countless ballistic trajectories. But what surprised Kaylan the most was not these, but the massive characters that appeared in every corner of this virtual space. These characters were not computer programs written by humans, but the words of Alpha civilization. As a human hacker who can read Alpha text, Kaylan saw the meaning of these Alpha texts with only a few glances. They are the underlying structure of this virtual world. This complete immersion system is not independent of human beings. The most important core technologies developed all come from Alpha civilization. Ian's eyes kept moving on these character fragments. The more he looked at them, the more doubts he had in his heart. Logically speaking, this underlying structure should be a black technology belonging to Alpha civilization. For the technology of writing this completely immersive system for human resources, this architecture is equivalent to a black box. They can embed this black box wherever they need to use it, but they cannot make any interference in the internal structure and operation of the black box. However, in this underlying architecture, Kaylan saw a lot of programming logic unique to humans. He didn't think it was a coincidence. Could it be that in addition to himself and the Prophet, there is a third, or even more person who can understand the Alpha text? However, if such a person exists, and this person has a close cooperative relationship with the Institute, then why have the Institute's technical difficulties that have been stuck for more than 10 or even decades due to language barriers not yet overcome? Aren't those important projects inferior to a fully immersive system used for virtual training and battle situation derivation? This is no longer a question of whether there are many doubts, but that it simply does not conform to the logic of normal human behavior. It's like humans in the old era made outstanding technological breakthroughs in a certain field, but they didn't apply this new technology to military industry or people's livelihood fields. Entertainment products. If the world was really like this, let alone building an ark, I am afraid that mankind would have been destroyed along with the solar system 1,000 years ago. The time pause ended, and all the NPCs on the street exploded into balls of blood-red mist, with their disintegrated limbs scattered on the ground. Those firearms that were roaring and pouring out firepower a second ago exploded one after another, and hot metal fragments flew everywhere. Kaylan was stunned for a moment, and then immediately quit the game. When he sat up from the immersion chamber, he found that the technician responsible for monitoring the status of the equipment was staring blankly at the screen without saying a word. On the screen was the last scene before the end of the game, the hellish Mogadishu. The purgatory here is not an exaggerated adjective, but a purgatory in the true sense. Flames and flesh are spread throughout every inch of space, twisted and broken bones can be seen everywhere, and death falls on every person instantly like a curse. An incredible force directly crushed them. Even those buildings seemed to have been hit by a magnitude 10 earthquake. How could this happen? How could this happen? The technician muttered to himself. What happened? Kaylan took off his hood and looked at him and asked. Just now, just a second before you exited the game, the entire program suddenly froze for a moment. When the lag was restored, the entire virtual world collapsed. No, it can't be said to be a crash. After the lag is over, all subroutines are still running normally, and all the virtual rules and physical laws we set originally have not been violated. You see, the blood on the ground is still flowing to the ground and has not floated into the air. The wood burned by the flames is gradually carbonized instead of disappearing directly, but it shouldn't be like this. There is a bug in the program, a very serious bug, Kaylan said calmly. All data and records will be sealed and not backed up. No one present will spread the news outside. I will report this matter directly to the Police Advanced Organization. Institute, the technician asked subconsciously. No, it is a higher level existence than the Institute, Kaylan said. I hope you can understand that the serious nature of this matter has exceeded the capabilities of the Institute. If you don't want to be used by the people above, if it is to be sealed permanently by physical means, it would be best to forget everything you just saw. It's beyond the scope of the Institute's capabilities. This is impossible. The technician seemed to want to argue, but was immediately interrupted by Kaylan. I can tell you one thing. The underlying architecture of this fully immersive system, that is, the black box that you cannot interfere with, actually uses the technology of Alpha civilization, and the bug this time is located here. In the black box. Now you know why I asked you to keep it secret. What? It's actually Alpha. The other party was stunned for a moment. As a technician, he naturally knew about the existence of this black box, but at first he didn't think so much about it and thought it was because the Institute wanted to keep it secret. The program inside the black box was sealed, but now that he heard Kaylan say this, the technician suddenly understood. No wonder the first precaution in the training process is to strictly prohibit cracking the black box. Emotions are not man-made. His expression suddenly became serious and nervous, and he nodded hurriedly. I understand. In addition to this technician, there were also Cheng Dong from the Security Bureau and 2 medical staff on the New Dawn. Although they didn't understand what the black box Kaylan meant, since when it comes to Alpha civilization, this is definitely not a trivial matter. Do I need to apply to the headquarters to mobilize more manpower? Cheng Dong asked Kaylan. We can control the entire New Dawn to ensure that no information will be leaked. There are only 5 of us who know about this matter now. The more people there are, the more likely it is that mistakes will occur. Don't forget, there have been moles in your security bureau. Kaylan shook his head. It's just temporary. Teasing people is enough to attract the attention of those who are interested. What about them? Otherwise? Cheng Dong said, his hand involuntarily placed on the holster on his waist. Kaylan naturally knew that the agent leader was referring to silencing. In the eyes of this group of people, compared with ARC's interests and safety, personal life is simply something that can be discarded at will. No matter it is their own life is still the life of others. No, 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 it won't be a big deal. Kaylan waved his hand quickly. Team leader Cheng Dong, you are responsible for keeping an eye on them here and telling them not to run around and not to come into contact with other people, including yourself. Then do you want to handcuff or tie him up? Probably not necessary. Kaylan glanced at the technician who was still in a state of shock and the 2 medical staff with depressed expressions on their faces. These 3 people were only civilian staff. Since they had not received body modification is not about strengthening people. Although both medical staff have military memberships, the combat effectiveness of the medical staff on the battleship is still far behind those of the Army's medical soldiers who need to follow the troops into battle. Even if these 3 people go together, they probably won't be enough for Cheng Dong to fight with one hand. Unless there is a heretic sect member who can use the holy word hidden among them, this possibility is almost zero, and even if there is such a hidden object, it is estimated that a whole team of fully armed agents will be sent. There's no point in staring. I think I have to go back to the Ark, Kaylan said. Until I come back, I can only have you stay in this room. Do you need me to send someone to escort you? Cheng Dong asked again. No, I will ask the captain of Fleet Zero to ask for escorts. Kaylan rejected the proposal. I will say it again, the sixth person cannot be allowed to know about this before the decision is made above. Yes, Cheng Dong nodded solemnly. After explaining these things, Kaylan transferred all the records just now to a hard drive, then cleared all the cached data in the device and formatted all the storage. Then, he used his special authority to lock up the infirmary. As for the 4 people locked inside, there was a toilet in the infirmary anyway, and the emergency food stored in the safe was enough for the 4 of them. Half a month's consumption. Not only that, Kaylan also cut off all network connections in the medical room and set a label at the door saying no one is allowed to approach during special operations. In this way, this medical room has truly become a place. An isolated island inside a battleship. He originally wanted these 4 people to stay in the confinement room for a while, but the walls of the confinement room on the battleship were made of one-way glass. People inside could not see outside, but people outside could see inside the confinement room. It can be seen clearly that if the news that 4 people, including the special agent team leader of the Security Bureau, were sent to the solitary room spread in the fleet, it would be difficult to explain. Furthermore, we can't just leave the entire virtual immersion equipment in the infirmary. The 4 of them stay here to prevent leaks and also act as guards. After sealing off the corridor where the infirmary was located, Kaylan went to the bridge of the New Dawn, made up a random excuse, and asked the commander of the Zero Fleet for a transport plane. This commander is a confidant directly appointed by the Undead Crew Association. Kaylan does not need to say it explicitly. As long as it hints that it is related to above, he will give Kaylan the greatest support. But when he got on the transport plane, Kaylan was in trouble. Although he and Cheng Dong and others said they were going back to the Ark to report the matter to their superiors, the problem was that he had not yet had a complete showdown with the undead crew. If he told them about the matter, wouldn't it be tantamount to asking for trouble? He didn't think that he could hide the cost from this group of people by using data files as evidence, rather than fabricating a lie that could be exposed at any time. It was better not to say a word. Or, simply confess to them directly. Kaylan thought about it and waited until the transport plane had flown into the floating airport, but in the end he still couldn't make a decision. This was a crucial move, and once he made it, he would have no chance of regretting it. Kaylan, who was worried, walked down the gangway. Before his feet even stepped on the inside of the tarmac, he heard someone calling his name in the distance. The people who came to pick him up were 2 girls from the hunting group, intern Qin Zhao and hunting group chief pilot Valentina. The hounds and others are busy with the joint exploration of Vagunakotaur, and the only free hands in the entire team are Qin Zhao, who has just joined, and Valentina, who usually doesn't care much about these things. When Kaylan contacted the hunting group before, he used the communication line of Fleet Zero, so he couldn't explain the matter clearly on the phone. He only said that he wanted to come back to do something. As for what exactly it was, the matter was not disclosed even a word. Captain, here Qin Zhao, wearing a smart training uniform, walked up and handed a bottle of pure water to Kaylan. Her hair is still very short, and has just grown to the same length as her chin. Although her long hair was cut in a dream when she was in the bottomless sinkhole, her body was completely synchronized with the dream. This action has also been completed in reality. The hound specifically mentioned this incident afterwards. Fortunately, the positioning of the folding knife was quite accurate. If it had been a little off, it might have been the neck instead of the hair. Where are the hounds and the others? Are they still busy? Kaylan took the bottle and asked with a smile. Uncle Hound and the others are going to Yes Consortium today. The only ones left at the headquarters are Senior Valentina and me, Qin Zhao replied. Oh, by the way, Someone just came from the headquarters. He should still be waiting at the meeting. He's in the guest room, Captain, do you want to see him later? Who? I don't know him, but looking at the information on the business card, he is from the Morgan Consortium. P.S. I just received a notice that all employees in Shaoxing will be tested for nucleic acid starting from today. Fortunately, I rarely go out on weekdays, so it is relatively safe. The epidemic prevention situation has become more and more severe recently. I hope everyone can take care of themselves, wear protective equipment, try not to go to crowded places, and never travel far. Safety is the most important thing. Just stay at home when you have nothing to do. Read the novel, post this chapter to brag and vote, are you right? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 555. Oh, people from the Morgan Consortium. Kailan deliberately dragged his voice, then let him wait a little longer. Isn't this going to be bad? Qin Zhao said worriedly, but Valentina looked indifferent. What's wrong? I didn't see any intention of holding back when these grandsons framed me before. Now they want to give in? There is no such a cheap deal in the world. Captain, the person in that video on the internet shouldn't be you, right? Qin Zhao asked cautiously. It's me, what's wrong? Qin Zhao couldn't help but let out a low cry, and a blush suddenly appeared on his face. Did you misunderstand something? The first half of the video is indeed a genuine video. At that time, I happened to see through their trick and planned to handcuff the two women and take them back to the battleship for interrogation. In the end, they gave me the operation was taken out of context. The sound of the black screen at the end is the false accusation they forged. In other words, the statements we made are all true, Qin Zhao asked in disbelief. Of course, I am not afraid of being distorted. I didn't do those things, so what does it matter if I announce the truth directly? Kailan shrugged. But, I've seen the public relations of those companies, they don't do this. Qin Zhao said in confusion. Because the butts of those people who need to be wiped are themselves stained with shit, Kailan said, our hunting group is an excellent company that abides by laws and regulations. We are not afraid of any dirty information being dug up, so naturally we don't need that. It's a public relations tool. As long as the truth of the matter is made public and made clear, people with brains can see who has the problem at a glance. Then, what about those brainless people? Qin Zhao's face was full of doubts. When that video was first exposed, many people believed that you really did that. Even if we announce the truth later, there will always be people who think this is just our whitewashing. Such brainless people, except for a few people with ulterior motives, how much role do you think they can play in guiding public opinion? Kailan paused and continued, the story of 3 people becoming a tiger. You know, since 3 people can make a tiger out of negative rumors, why can't 3 people make a tiger out of the truth? Although the truth of this matter is far less exciting than the fabricated rumors, there is a bigger story behind it. The melon, if you were an ordinary netizen with a passerby's perspective, would you like to delve into the so-called scandal of a small hunting group that was founded less than half a year ago, or would you rather see a 1,000-year history that has been passed down from the old era to the present day? Is the Morgan Consortium in trouble? Qin Zhao opened his mouth slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he couldn't. What Kailan said is not unreasonable. Those netizens who are keen on eating melons will always watch the excitement and never take it too seriously. Since they are all scandals related to the new S-class ruins Yagonactor, then why is the protagonist of this scandal? It can't be the Morgan Consortium. Although it was apparently Anaheim Electronics that was exposed, the person who instigated the hacker to attack the Anaheim database was from the Morgan family and was the 5th of the 6 sons of Morgan Sr. Although in the fight for inheritance rights, there is a high probability that he will not be able to snatch away his brothers, but even if he cannot become the principal of the Morgan Consortium, he is still a very important role. In fact, Everyone knows that few of the top executives in these consortiums have clean butts, but no one dares to say it, or, it's useless to say it. In ancient China, there was a saying that a doctor cannot be punished by punishment. However, in the era of capitalism, capitalists suddenly became the aristocrats of the new era. This sentence naturally became plutocrats cannot be punished. If nothing else, let's just talk about the most typical capitalist country in the old era, the United States. In that era, the weight of a word from the boss of the Morgan Consortium was even heavier than the words of the President of the United States. Although this situation is not serious on ARC, because these consortiums hold a lot of wealth and power, they can still be regarded as the privileged class of the new era. Ordinary civilians who have always been at the bottom of society most like to see the plot of people who originally lived in the privileged class, falling from the distant clouds overnight and falling into a stinking mire full of filth. Anyone who passes by the quagmire can be scolded and spit on. Although the privileged class still exists, the lives of ordinary people will not be substantially improved because of the removal of one or two scumbags, but at least it is quite satisfying. Let's go shopping in the commercial street first. I've been bored in the office on the ship for the past few days. I feel like mushrooms are growing on my body. Where are you going? Valentina asked. Do you need me to drive the mecha? No, 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 Kaylan quickly shook his head. Although the undead crew, in the name of the United Council, gave the hunting god hunting group permission to use armed mechas on the public roads inside the Ark, they still had to drive if they wanted to go shopping. As for a mecha, it would be too ostentatious. But without Valkyrie, I can't guarantee your safety 100%. Valentina is wearing a straight trench coat that is longer than her knees today. She has a very thin figure, but this trench coat fits her body. But it looks a little bulging. Without even thinking about it, there must be all kinds of weapons stuffed under the clothes. Fortunately, they all have special passes, otherwise they would probably scare the security inspector to pee if they go through the security check with a guy like this. This is in the Ark, not in the wilderness. It's not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal. Kaylan walked around Valentina and couldn't help but ask, how much did you bring? Arms. 2 short-barreled carbine ARC-01 rifles with 6 magazines and 120 rounds, 2 Bull-Tamer mini-submachine guns with 4 magazines and 100 rounds, 4 shock bombs and 2 offensive bombs grenades, a 9mm fully automatic pistol and a gauze pistol, 2 kilograms of plastic explosives, and a telescopic spear. Valentina opened her windbreaker and said, "Oh, I also want to ask Ray immediately. My arm prostheses and leg prostheses were equipped with weapons, including hidden firearms with a 50-meter range and switchblades." Stop, stop. Kaylan looked at the gun magazines hanging full on the inside of her windbreaker, and couldn't help but stretched out her hand to rub her forehead. Are you going shopping or fighting? With so much equipment, it's not heavy. Hound asked me to be responsible for your security work, so I can't be negligent, Valentina said calmly. Moreover, this windbreaker has a hidden skeleton inside, which can transfer most of the load to the prosthetic limb, so it won't weigh me down. Action. I'm afraid you are not in the advanced stage of phobia of insufficient firepower. Kaylan noticed that even the soldiers who got off the transport plane looked at the side in a daze, obviously because of Valian. Jingna was surprised by the large number of weapons under her clothes. If you are performing security tasks, I can understand bringing a microcharge pistol. The CQB carbine is also within the range of optional weapons. The problem is, why are you bringing grenades and plastic explosives? Grenade can be used to attack enemies behind bunkers, and plastic bombs are very effective for clearing obstacles and carrying vehicles, Valentina answered very seriously. Then have you considered the consequences of detonating these 2 kilograms of plastic explosives in the downtown area? Kaylan patted Valentina on the shoulder and said sincerely, Xiao Na, we are ruin hunters, not KB elements. Even those mercenaries would not take such things with them on the streets. As Kaylan said this, he reached out and took off the guns and explosives from the inside of Valentina's windbreaker, and then waved to the soldiers watching the show over there. Please find a safe package, pack these things, and send them to the headquarters of the God Hunting Group, Kaylan said to the soldier. Yes, the soldier saluted Kaylan, then ran away holding the pile of dangerous goods. By the way, Major Chi, didn't he take you to places like commercial streets before? Kaylan asked Valentina until the soldier ran away. Major Chi only took me to commercial streets and black markets that sold second-hand mechanical parts. At that time, we basically spent the whole year running around for the mechas for the competition. When we almost put together a mecha, the competition is about to start, Valentina said. Can't the mecha from last year be used? Kaylan was a little confused. With a little modification and strengthening, it should be enough. I won't have to start over from scratch every year to get a mecha, right? Only by getting a good ranking in the mecha competition can I get enough prize money, so I work hard every time. Unless the mecha cannot move at all, I will not voluntarily give up, Valentina replied. Understood. Emotionally, you won't admit defeat until the mecha is scrapped. This is too life-threatening. It's a blessing that you can survive until now. Even if I don't squeeze out every last drop of performance from these airframes, the overloaded skeletons won't be able to participate in the next competition. Other teams have spare airframes and a large number of replacement parts, but we don't. You can fight from start to finish with one mecha. No, no, no. I'm not talking about the mechas, but your people. In such a high-intensity battle, the mechas will be scrapped, and the pilots shouldn't be much better either. The injury is certain, but compared to my old injuries, those injuries, I actually didn't feel much pain. Valentina rolled up a sleeve, revealing her only remaining left arm. On the pale skin, there is an ugly scar like a centipede, extending from the wrist to the elbow. This is the injury I received during the last competition. It should be the most serious one. The broken armor plate was cut open vertically, his forearm was broken, and all the muscles were turned out, but the other party suffered even worse. I penetrated his cockpit with a fighting dagger and cut off one of his legs. Valentina turned her sleeves back and continued, Major Chi scolded me many times. He told me not to work so hard. However, if I don't work hard, I'm afraid the bonus will not be enough to put together the mecha, and, then, at that time, I thought that I didn't have a few more years to live, and I was going to die sooner or later anyway, so why not fight while I could still earn more bonuses? Kaylan and Qin Zhao looked at each other, but neither took her words. Major Chi hopes to use the bonus to take me to see better doctors and buy better medicines, but I would rather he spend all the bonus on the body, as long as I can win the championship. If you win the championship, the bonus will be enough to cure the disease, right? Kaylan asked softly. I didn't think about medical treatment at that time, I just wanted to use the money to track down the original person, that is, man, find out his whereabouts, then kill him, and then use the remaining money to keep him alive. Provide care for Major Chi in his old age. Although you don't have to worry about the money for medical treatment now, and man is dead, you can compete for the championship in the finals that are about to be held. Anyway, this time we are using a virtual battle mode. For someone like you who is desperate, the style of play is quite advantageous. Other players may not be able to adapt in a short period of time. Speaking of this, Kaylan suddenly paused. However, the military's participating team, you have to be careful. P.S. Thanks to Zugwang2 for the 222 starting coins. P.P.S. I know that regarding the plot in the first half of this chapter, some readers will definitely question why the undead crew did not completely destroy these consortiums and publicize the means of production they control. In order not to affect the flow and look and feel of the text, I can save this paragraph for explanation later in the plot. It's not that the undead crew wouldn't want to, it's that they can't. In history, Human beings have tried many times to build a perfect society where everyone is equal and free of capital, class, discrimination, and hatred. Abroad, there is utopia, and in China, there is peach blossom spring, but after all, it is about an illusion of a perfect world. Anyone who tries to do this in reality fails without exception. Human beings are creatures with desires, and desires will expand infinitely. Some people once believed that utopia will be born as long as social productivity can exceed everyone's needs. But in fact, human desires cannot be satisfied at all. When survival is threatened, what they want is to have enough food, clothing, and a safe place to live. After these are satisfied, new desires will arise, whether it's luxury watches and cars that men pursue, or fancy clothes and cosmetics that women pursue. Even as a plastic guy, it's actually the same for me. When I earned $3,000 a month, I thought about buying some assembled HG_MGS to play with. When I earned $5,000 a month, I started searching for PG online. Now I've even expanded to the point where I started to playing with high-end finished products like MB. Therefore, I feel that if human thinking patterns cannot be completely changed, then a completely equal society will never appear in the human world. Perhaps this kind of utopia will briefly appear when mankind is facing an existential crisis, and the Ark in this article was probably born in such an environment. But as time passes and the threat fades away, everything will return to how it was before. The Dragon Slayer becomes the dragon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 556. They are very strong. Valentina nodded. Leighton showed me a video of their training match. Their opponent was a wealthy club with 3 ace pilots, but they were suppressed throughout the whole process. When the opponent attacked, the 3 ace pilots couldn't even organize a decent counterattack. They only lasted less than 2 minutes, 2 of the aircraft were severely damaged, and 1 surrendered. How long do you think you can last if you were their opponent? Kaylan asked instead. If our teammates were you and Leighton, we should only be able to hold on for 30 seconds, Valentina said mercilessly, without any thought of saving face for Kaylan and Leighton. But what she said is correct. Ian's body has too many limitations. Although the long-range firepower is extremely terrifying, if someone gets close to him, he will instantly turn into fish on the chopping board and be slaughtered by others, for those who have been around all year round. For military pilots who are involved in cruel battlefields, how to close the distance while avoiding long-range firepower is simply a required course in combat. You must know that among those indigenous creatures, there are also a large number of turret-type subspecies that are specialized in long-range attacks. The mission of the high-speed mecha units in the field corps is often to cut in from the flanks and eliminate these turrets with powerful firepower for the frontal troops. In game terms, this group of people's cutting the back row operation is simply perfect. Kaylan had no confidence that he could survive in the hands of these people. As for Leighton, let alone that. Although his operating skills are better than Ian's, he basically has no special skills and is a balanced pilot. Balance means that we can only rely on hard power, and Leighton's strength still hasn't touched the threshold of a quasi-ace. All serious aces are suppressed by these military pilots, let alone amateur players like them. Then if it's one-on-one, how sure are you? Kaylan asked a different question. He knew very well that in 3-on-3, without cheating, they would have absolutely no chance against the military team. Odds of winning. But when it comes to cheating, Kaylan naturally thinks of the humanoid self-propelled cheat Ze-Logo, but if he sends Ze-Logo to compete, he has to take the risk of being discovered. After all, that guy's ability is too terrifying. This difference in strength cannot be concealed by acting at all. This kind of competition is no different from online games. The video of the competition will be studied over and over again during review. If someone really discovers ZE Logo's anomaly, it will be more of a loss than a gain. If ZE Logo's identity is exposed for the sake of winning the mecha competition, Kaylan weighed it in his mind and finally gave up the idea. No more than 30%, Valentina said, they are stronger than me and more ruthless than me. It seems that the champion of this competition should be the military representative team who came out halfway. Kaylan shrugged helplessly, forget it, if you don't talk about this, you haven't even eaten, right? No. Qin Zhao shook her head. Knowing that Kaylan was going to return to the Ark, she and Valentina were waiting at the airport 4 hours in advance. It just so happens that I haven't eaten either. I was already hungry when I was on the transport plane. I walked around looking for food. I have compressed dry food with me, Valentina said as she took out 2 energy bars from her pocket. Well, it's not like we're outside. You can always find a place to eat. Oh, Valentina silently put the energy bar back into her pocket. Let's solve the food problem nearby. I remember there is a food street outside this airport. Let's go there to eat and I'll treat you, Kaylan said. In the old days, the biggest feature of restaurants near the airport was that the food was expensive and the portions were small. You might have to spend 3 to 4 times the normal price to buy food that was half the normal portion or even less, and the taste was average. Not only food, even fast food such as Coke and instant noodles, which are priced the same across the country, will double in price at airports and stations. If you want to eat in such places, you must be prepared to be severely ripped off. After all, the rents of shops near the airport are very high, and the customers they receive are all transient travelers. There are no repeat customers, so the shopkeepers rip off people without any worries, but this phenomenon has completely disappeared on the Ark. Inverted. On the Ark, all the hotels close to the airport are basically synonymous with high quality, low price, and high cost performance, not to mention those restaurants and hotels in prosperous areas of high-end neighborhoods, even those open in ordinary residential areas. The prices may not be as affordable as those near the airport. For people in the old era, airplanes were an expensive and high-end way to travel. Not everyone could afford a ticket costing several thousand yuan. In this era, truly wealthy people rarely go into the wilderness. Even if they want to go sightseeing occasionally, they usually use private flying vehicles. As for the main service targets of the civil aviation industry, the only remaining ones are relic hunters and mercenaries, as well as miners and scavengers who don't have much money in their pockets. There is absolutely no profit to be squeezed out of these people, and there are still many bad-tempered thorns in the hunters and mercenaries. These guys who lick blood from their knives might just take out their guns and shoot them if they disagree. It's on the table. In this way, any hotel near the airport would dare to rip off customers. Kaylan and the 2 girls walked slowly into this food street that was filled with the smell of oil smoke. It was his first time to come to this airport, but the similar street scene still gave Kaylan a familiar feeling. Before he got to know Hound and the others, every time after exploring the ruins, he would go to such a small restaurant to have a good meal. For Kaylan at that time, a bowl of genuine braised pork, it can definitely be regarded as a top-level enjoyment. Although these restaurants are cheap, they always stock some high-end products such as real meat and homegrown vegetables. These ingredients are specially prepared for ruin hunters and mercenaries. A fruitful journey needs a feast to celebrate, a near-death adventure needs wine and meat to suppress the shock. Even if they lose their brothers and sisters, many people will go to these places to remember them. Compared to workers who only order the cheapest food, the restaurants near the airport obviously welcome such diners more. The first shop at the street corner is a barbecue restaurant. 2 rows of 4 to 5 meter long open-air grills are strutting across the door. The guys with big muscles and round waists are holding dozens or hundreds of skewers in one hand and putting them on the grills. He rolled it a few times and threw it into the stainless steel basin aside. Most of these skewers are artificial meat synthesized with soy protein, not real meat. This kind of synthetic meat is cooked itself, as long as the coating oil is sprinkled with a little seasoning, just heat it up. If you turn it over and grill it like real meat, what you end up with on the table will probably be black and hard charcoal. "What do you want to eat?" Kaylan asked. He just glanced at that barbecue restaurant and skipped it. The only piece of real meat for sale in the whole store was hung under the sign with an iron hook, which was half a fan of pork, but those parts were better. All the meat has been cut off, leaving some poor spots, and the meat doesn't look very fresh. "I don't know," Valentina said. In her opinion, the only purpose of food is to fill her stomach. If Kaylan hadn't dragged them to the restaurant, she would have been chewing the food in her pocket. "The energy is great." "You decide, I can do it," Qin Zhao said. Although she can be considered a senior foodie, after all, this trip is a treat for her boss, and she feels that she should not make decisions for her boss. How about this one?" Kaylan pointed to a store 10 steps away. The facade of this store is only about half of that of the first barbecue restaurant. A shaky plastic low door creaks with the breeze, and a sign stained with oil hangs above the low door. "Old Hunter Restaurant." Judging from the name, it's either a restaurant run by a retired relic hunter, or a hotel that specifically provides services to relic hunters. There were several very aged plastic tables and chairs at the entrance of the hotel. The yellowed plastic material even made Kaylan wonder if it would break if he sat down. Next to the low door is a half-meter square window. Inside the window is the stove. The thick exhaust pipe pokes directly out of the round hole above the window, and solid oil dirt falls from the head of the pipe. It fell down, glowing with dark brown light. A middle-aged man with a strong build but not too exaggerated muscles stood in front of the stove, holding a huge iron pot in one hand, and holding a huge spatula in the other hand to stir-fry. This kind of cooking utensil is basically only found in military cooking classes. Even ordinary chefs cannot lift this kind of cast iron cauldron with a net weight of 20 kilograms even with two hands. Seeing Kaylan approaching with the two girls, the chef glanced at them and said, "There is no room inside. If you don't mind, you can sit at the door of the store." "Okay," Kaylan nodded. He originally planned to sit outside instead of running into a cramped room and crowding with a group of men smelling of sweat. It would be fine if he was alone. The key is that there are two good-looking girls around him. If he encounters a drunkard or a scumbag, he is not afraid of a fight, but he can't destroy other people's shops. "Come on." Kaylan found the cleanest table and sat down, turned around and asked, "Boss, do you have a menu?" "No." The chef shook his head, picked up a handful of seasonings very neatly, and threw them into the pot. Are there any special dishes?" "I only sell fried rice here." "You can decide what you want to fry. You can put whatever is on the table," the chef said, taking a half step back and exposing the vegetable sink on the right. There were not many things on the table, but there were both meat and vegetables, dozens of eggs stacked on cardboard shelves, half-cut hams as thick as a bowl, various fresh-looking vegetables and fungi, and a piece of meat from the ceiling. The old bacon hanging from the wall has been dried to a black color. "Then let's have 3 bowls of egg fried rice, add some shiitake mushrooms and enoki mushrooms, as well as onions, lettuce, and potato slices," Kaylan said. If the Hound were here, they would definitely make some complaints. "You have a net worth of hundreds of millions now that you're here, why don't you just eat egg fried rice from a roadside stall when you're having a treat?" "Want chili?" the chef asked again. "I want it. What about you?" "Yes." "Yes," the two women said in unison. "Oh, by the way, that piece of bacon." Kaylan pointed to the old piece of bacon hanging on the rope. "It's authentic black pork, the treasure of my store here. If you want to add it, it won't be cheap." The chef glanced at Ian's clothes from the corner of his eye and said. Kaylan was wearing a daily training uniform from the field army, but because of his special status, he had removed his epaulets and badges. This type of military uniform is very popular on the black market and is comfortable and durable. It is extremely cost-effective and is sought after by many hunters and mercenaries, Although the one worn by Kaylan is almost brand new, the price will not exceed 1000 credits. His look is just like that of a mid-level hunter or almost like mercenaries. Qin Zhao and Valentina are dressed like ordinary civilians, and the total number of their outfits does not exceed 500 credit points. How much does this piece of bacon cost? Kaylan asked curiously. Based on grams, 1 gram is 35. Damn it, Kaylan sighed inwardly, and almost asked, is your fat made of gold, or your lean meat made of gold? Selling by the gram, could it be that this boss is selling this? A piece of meat as top-notch sashimi in a high-end hotel? However, this price really aroused Ian's curiosity. He wanted to know what was so great about this bacon that sold for 35.1 grams. With the idea of paying an IQ tax at the worst, Kaylan nodded and said, then cut it in half. Half? That's more than half a caddy. The chef raised his head and looked at Kaylan again suspiciously. How much money can such a young mercenary have in his pocket? You shouldn't spend nearly 10,000 credits on a meal just to pick up these two girls, right? Yes, it's half, Kaylan said. If it's less, you won't be able to taste it, right? Okay, but you have to pay first. The boss pointed to the payment code posted by the window, almost covered with oil. How much is the total? There aren't many customers like you who buy half a caddy at a time. I'll give you a discount. Add it all up, it's 7,000. Okay, Kaylan took out his mobile phone and planned to pay, but at this moment, a somewhat discordant voice suddenly came from the store. Hey, boss, what kind of fairy meat is this? Half a piece is selling for 7,000. By the way, I just asked you the price of this bacon. Didn't you say it's not for sale? Are you afraid that your brothers will destroy your store? Haha, look at that Kaisi outside, looking stupid. It's easy to kill just by looking at it. I don't sell it to you because I know you can't afford it. The chef and owner glanced at the group of diners and said coldly. What do you mean? Are you looking down on people? A grumpy mercenary stood up immediately. He was more than 2 meters tall, and his head almost touched the low ceiling of the store. Behind him, several other people dressed as mercenaries also had malicious looks on their faces. P.S. Thank you for the 500 starting coins for the reward. Brother, your ID is so hard to type. I held it in for 5 minutes but couldn't type it out in the end. I had to copy and paste it in the background. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 557. Wait a minute. At this time, a mercenary wearing a brown tactical vest pulled his companion in front. Boss, this guy seems to have been in the field force. Been in the field force? How do you know? The mercenary known as Boss turned his face sideways and asked with a frown. Look at the helmet hanging on the wall. It's an EOP 910 tactical helmet produced by the military in the early years. The mercenary pointed to a helmet that was hung on the stove, stained with putty, and used as a utility rack. The helmet said, the shape of this helmet is very special. I can't mistake it. That thing was only equipped with troops of the Field Corps before it was discontinued. Humph, you're scared out of your wits just by a broken helmet, the boss snorted with disdain. Who knows where he picked up this helmet from? Some nook and cranny on the black market, and hung it in the store. Is it intended to scare people? Unfortunately, I don't like this. But the mercenary wearing a brown tactical vest had a fearful look on his face and hesitated to speak. Don't worry, even if he has really been in the field army, he is probably just a gang leader, otherwise he wouldn't come here to open a shabby restaurant. There are 6 of us, and he is the only one. What are you cowardly about? You don't need to come, I can take care of this guy by myself. The 2-meter-tall mercenary grabbed the assault rifle leaning on the table. He grabbed the front handguard, obviously intending to take it. The gun is used as a melee weapon. On the Ark, it is a felony to shoot at someone without permission. Even soldiers performing stability maintenance tasks cannot shoot without permission from their superiors. But if you just use the butt of a gun to wheel people around, it will at most be considered a violation of public security regulations. This group of mercenaries has fought with many people at first glance, and they know these rules clearly. Seeing the smell of gunpowder in the store getting stronger and stronger, Kaylan couldn't help but feel a headache. Could he really be the bad luck star? Not to mention the various unexpected situations and emergencies encountered while exploring the ruins. You can encounter this kind of thing no matter how you go out to the street to have a meal. The fried rice hasn't even been cooked yet, and the restaurant is about to be smashed. However, Kaylan didn't intend to just slap his ass and leave. In any case, the cause of this incident had something to do with him. He took a step forward, walked to the window, and asked the restaurant owner, "Do you need any help? I can call the police for you." "It's okay, I can handle it." The boss first turned around and turned off the air supply valve of the stove. Then he put all the knives on the stove back into the knife holder, and even the spatulas with sharp edges were thrown into the drawer. Kaylan thought to himself that this was probably because he was afraid of being injured by the sharp weapons placed everywhere in the melee, but there were 6 people on the other side and he was the only one. Did he really plan to fight against 6 with his bare hands? Could this guy be an enhanced person? If it is true as the brown vest said, the restaurant owner was once a soldier in the field force, then the possibility of being an enhanced person is not small, but the problem is that among these 6 mercenaries, at least 2 a strengthened person. One is the strong man who is more than 2 meters tall, and the other is what they call the boss. Although Kaylan couldn't see the enhancement levels of the mercenaries, he could deduce their economic level from the value of their equipment. They only had 2 first-level enhancements. As for the boss, he was pretty good. The possibility of losing 2 levels, as for the 3rd level of intensive surgery, is not something that this group of people can afford. However, among ordinary soldiers in the field force, the proportion of enhanced people is only about 15%, and 90% of these 15% of enhanced people are first-level enhanced people. The proportion of enhanced people in the elite troops may be slightly higher, reaching about 30%, but the enhanced people who can reach level 3 or higher are basically mid-level officers. After retirement, they will not be like this. Appearance. Of course, except for the 2 special cases of Lao Go and Chi Hanfan. If analyzed based on paper strength alone, Kaylan is not optimistic about the hotel owner. But for some reason, subconsciously, he had no doubt that the restaurant owner could win. And it will be very easy to win. Seeing the restaurant owner inserting the kitchen knife back into the knife holder, the mercenary boss's eyes twitched twice, and a vein on his forehead suddenly popped out. "What do you mean? It's not interesting." The restaurant owner shook his head. "Actually, when you came in, I wanted to remind you that smoking is prohibited in this restaurant." "Oh? Then I will smoke another one in front of you right now." "What can you do to me?" the mercenary boss said, taking out a wrinkled paper cigarette box from his pocket and pouring it out. "Got a cigarette? You were allowed to smoke before because you were my guests, but now..." Before the boss finished speaking, he was interrupted by the mercenary boss. "What's wrong? We are not your guests now?" "That's right. I am not your guest, I am your did." The mercenary boss only said the first half of the syllable of your father, and a black light suddenly flashed. None of the mercenaries could see clearly what happened, and the 2 fingers of their boss were caught in it. The cigarettes fell to the ground together, and the bright red blood seeped into the cigarette paper in an instant. The mercenary boss was stunned for a full 2 seconds before he reacted, and instantly burst into a shrill scream, "Ah, ah, my finger!" Although none of them saw the restaurant owner's movements, Kaylan used time stop to capture the scene at the critical moment. The restaurant owner's right hand just touched the apron around his waist, and between his fingers there was an extremely thin black blade, and in the next frame, the black blade had already come out of his hand, passing by the mercenary boss's knuckles without any hindrance, and was nailed to the opposite wall. Because the speed was so fast, the surface of the black blade was not even stained with blood, or in other words, until the black blade was nailed into the wall, the mercenary boss's fingers still looked intact. About half a second later, a very thin red line appeared on his knuckles. "What are you doing standing there? Come on. Come on. I'm going to chop off all 10 of his fingers." The mercenary boss pinched the base of the severed finger tightly with his other hand and furiously shouted at his companions, and after the initial daze passed, the other mercenaries rushed towards the restaurant owner. Fortunately, the indoor space of the hotel was extremely small, and the 2-meter-tall man occupied most of the aisle, blocking all his teammates behind him. At least, it's still a one-on-one situation for the time being. The giant mercenary roared and swung the ARC-01 rifle in his hand sideways. Judging from his movements, it seemed that he originally wanted to hit the boss on the head, but the ceiling was too low, so he couldn't. Fa raised the gun in his hand above his head. This guy didn't listen to their boss at all. Kaylan, who was fighting outside the store, whispered to himself. Although the mercenary boss had 2 of his fingers cut off by the other party, he never wanted the hotel owner's life from the beginning to the end. If someone died in a fight, the nature of the incident would be completely different. It's the same, not only will their mercenary licenses be revoked, but they will also be imprisoned for several years. By the time these people are released, their anus will probably be filled with shit. This is the bottom line in a fight, and this is the bottom line, but this giant man has obviously thrown this bottom line out of his mind. The butt of his gun was obviously aimed at the restaurant owner's head. If it hit, someone would be killed. Even if the restaurant owner is an enhanced person, if he can't avoid it, he may end up with a split brain. However, Kaylan was not worried about the hotel owner. Just from the action of throwing the throwing knife just now, it can be seen that this person is a master. If he can be hit by such an attack that only has brute force but no skills at all, that can only mean that he is too lazy to hide. Just when the gun butt turned into a black shadow and was about to touch the hotel owner's head, the giant man suddenly staggered back a few steps, and the rifle in his hand bounced against the wall on one side as if it was loaded with a spring. Bits of lime were scattered. The few mercenaries at the back looked at the giant man, who retreated in confusion. They only heard a sharp sound caused by the airflow passing through the strap hole on the gun butt at high speed, and then saw their companions stumbling. The ground fell back. If they hadn't stretched out their hands to support the giant man in time, the giant man would have sat down on the ground by this time. "Your gun is loaded with bullets, be careful of misfire," the hotel owner said calmly. At this time, the mercenaries discovered that the assault rifle in the giant man's hand was actually nailed to the wall. It was a long, thin black metal piece, with a dangerous sheen on its edge. The metal piece penetrated directly through the receiver of the assault rifle, like penetrating soaked toilet paper. Same. The Type 01 assault rifle in the hands of this mercenary is a genuine military version from the military arsenal. It is the standard equipment of the ARC military, as well as the economic version authorized by Military Industrial Enterprises and the economic version produced by underground workshops. Compared with the pirated version, the biggest feature of the military version is that a small amount of nano alloy is mixed into the raw materials. Although the content is less than 1%, it greatly improves the strength of the firearm structure. To process this kind of material, you must use a 100,000-ton stamping machine. But now, it was penetrated by a throwing knife thrown by an egg fried rice seller. The mercenaries had a look of surprise on their faces. As for the guy in the brown vest, he was already leaning towards the door, ready to escape at any time. "Come on? Why are you so scared? What a bunch of losers. Go up and beat him up." The mercenary boss, who was sweating profusely in pain, didn't even notice what had just happened, and was still yelling there. The hotel owner slowly took a step forward, and the group of mercenaries immediately took a step back in unison. The giant man was so shocked that the muscles on his body trembled violently, completely losing his fierce look just now. "Boss, boss, this is a tough fight." The brown vest lowered his voice and said to the mercenary boss, we may not be their opponents." "What did you say? Did you notice how your finger was broken just now?" This question immediately stopped the mercenary boss, and he looked intently at his wound. Although blood was still seeping out, it could be seen that the section of the severed finger was very smooth, and the skin on the edge was even no signs of tearing visible. At first, he thought that his finger was broken by a gun equipped with a silencer, but now it seems that this is not the case. "That guy used a throwing knife." The brown vest swallowed with some difficulty. "His throwing knife, just, pierced the receiver of the 0-1 rifle." "Type 01? The military version of Type 01, the mercenary boss felt as if his heartbeat had skipped a beat. Because of its excellent strength, the military version of Type 01 is often used as a melee weapon by mercenaries and even soldiers in the regular army. The nano-alloy-added gun body is extremely resistant to grass, even if it has experienced several high-intensity hand-to-hand combats. The body will not undergo too obvious deformation. This is very clear to everyone who has used this gun. Some people have also done experiments. Even if a 12.7 mm caliber heavy machine gun is fired against the receiver of the 0-1 rifle, it is impossible for the first few bullets to directly penetrate the receiver. The mercenary boss slowly turned his head and glanced at the gun nailed to the wall. "Let's go, hurry up and pick up my finger later." This group of mercenaries didn't even say a harsh word. They led their boss to exit the hotel in a panic and fled quickly towards the street. As for the restaurant owner, he calmly walked to the wall and pulled out the black sharp knife stuck on it. "Are you 33, Kaylan suddenly asked. "Do you know me?" The restaurant owner turned around and glanced at Kaylan lightly. "A friend of mine told me about you." "Which friend?" "His name is Zwiligetu, he is a ruins hunter of Mongolian origin," Kaylan replied. "Zwiligetu?" The restaurant owner read the name again. "Oh, I remember him, we have worked with him twice before. Well, he is a good person." "Aren't you a ruin hunter? Why did you open a restaurant here?" Kaylan was a little surprised to meet the 33 mentioned by Zwiligetu in this place. "Hunter is just a side job. Only when I'm too busy will I go outside for a walk." 33 smiled, picked up a rag, squatted down and wiped the blood on the ground. Kaylan felt that this man did not seem to be suffering from severe war traumatic stress syndrome as they had previously expected. His temperament gave Kaylan a feeling of being unwavering, even though he had just been with the group of people. When rogue mercenaries clashed, he spared no lives and did not harm anyone. As for the broken finger, as long as you seek medical treatment in time, it can be reattached for not much money, not to mention that the cross-section incision is so smooth, and the surgical conditions cannot be better. "I have something to ask you." "Explain." "Do you know Yagunakter? Are you interested in going up there?" Kaylan took the initiative to extend an olive branch to the other party. "That ancient battleship of the Alpha civilization? The 19th S-class ruins." 33 raised his head and looked at Kaylan. "The existence of the third civilization has not been officially announced to the outside world, so people have always thought that Yagunakter is an ancient warship built by the Alpha civilization." "Yes," Kaylan nodded. "Aren't the ruins temporarily closed to the public? Only hunters who have been invited can participate in the exploration." Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 558. I forgot to introduce myself. I am the leader of the Hunting God hunting group. Kaylan stretched out his hand towards the other party. "This is the chief pilot of the hunting group, Valentina. This is Qingzhao, a trainee hunter who just joined the job recently." "Kaylan? Are you the person in charge of the development of this new S-class ruins?" 33 finally showed a look of astonishment on his face. He first wiped off the oil and blood stains on his hands with his apron. Only then did he hold Ian's hand. Right. When we first met, you were much younger than I thought, 33 said. As an old Chinese saying goes, heroes are born out of youth. Like Lan, he is an Asian with black hair, black eyes, and yellow skin, and he is also of Chinese descent with the highest proportion of Asians. Thank you. Although I have seen the news about you, there is still a big gap between the real person and the video, 33 said seriously. The video he mentioned naturally refers to the black material secretly filmed by the Morgan Consortium. The clarity of the video, the AV quality is not an exaggeration, haha, Lan said. Official channels have never released his personal information. All leaked information came from the Morgan Consortium in the form of rumors. Although most people on the Ark have seen the video, among them there are really very few shots of Ian's face, and even if there are, they usually pass by in a flash. Coupled with the blurry image quality after video compression, if you are not an acquaintance, you will not be able to recognize him at all. Shouldn't you be in Fleet Zero? Why are you back? 33 suddenly asked. As a ruin hunter, he is still paying close attention to news related to Yagonactor, especially this. The new S-class ruins suddenly appeared next to the Ark. I came back to do some errands and happened to pass by here. I was too busy on the road and didn't have time to eat, so I thought I could do it nearby at this point. Lan suddenly laughed. By the way, where is our fried rice? Do it now, 33 said, taking the piece of bacon off the hook, pulling out a sharp kitchen knife, and smoothly cutting off a strip of meat with a nearly square cross-section. By the way, is this meat really that expensive? Lan asked curiously, sitting on a chair. Yes, 33 nodded. If you know Jolajitu, you also know that I am not a completely alone relic hunter. I have a fixed small team, which is composed of brothers who survived together. One of them opened a breeding farm, specializing in raising high-end livestock that are supplied to dignitaries. At his place, a pig can be sold for more than 400,000 credits. How much is the profit? If the profit is high, why don't I raise pigs too? Lan said half-jokingly. The space, equipment, and feed are not cheap, and the profit from a pig is only about 5%. That pig can earn more than 20,000 yuan. Isn't this much more comfortable than exchanging lives for money outside? By the way, your piece of bacon comes from his farm. 33 nodded. According to my method, it takes almost 2 kilograms of fresh meat to make 1 kilogram of bacon, and it has to be the best plum meat from the pig, plus various seasonings and processes. The price is not expensive. This uncle is right, although it is really expensive. If we go to the slaughterhouse to buy it ourselves, the same amount of black pig plum meat will cost about the same price. Qin Zhao, a senior foodie, whispered. Said to Lan. You have eaten? No, Qin Zhao suddenly shook his head like a rattle. I have never eaten black pork, but I have seen black pigs running. I used to like to watch all kinds of food videos when I couldn't sleep at night, then open a pack of spicy chips or potato chips and imagine them as the delicacies in the video. Plum pork is actually the meat from the shoulder blade of the pig. There is only one piece of plum meat on a pig, and the total weight is only 5 or 6 pounds. This is a very tender piece of lean meat, but the inside of the meat has grid-like vertical and horizontal lines. With staggered fat textures, the top-quality plum pork looks the same as expensive snowflake beef. The marble-like white lines are simply like a work of art. If a black pig raised according to the traditional method can be sold for 400,000 credits, then the small piece of plum meat above its neck is estimated to account for 1/10 or even more of the value of the entire pig. After all, in the eyes of those rich, if you want to eat, you have to eat the best. The price given by 33 is indeed not expensive, and can even be said to be quite affordable. But I can treat you to this meal, 33 said, raising the knife in his hand. The dark brown bacon was cut into countless square dices of the same size in the blink of an eye, and poured into a white porcelain bowl. But I also have a request. Do you want to participate in the exploration of Yagunactor? Right. I originally planned to invite you, but I didn't expect to have a big meal in vain. Kaylan lightly tapped the table in front of him with his nails. What about your old comrades? Do they want to come together? I will contact them later. If anyone is interested, I will bring them along. If they don't want to come, I won't force them. 33 replied, our team formation is entirely voluntary. There is no forcibly say it. He rubbed a thick piece of fat meat around a large iron pot so that the inside of the pot was covered with a crystal clear oil film. Then he poured the rice that had been cooled and hardened into the pot and quickly turned it over. Stir-fried. You have to use cold rice for fried rice. If you use hot rice that has just come out of the pot for frying, it will be difficult to separate the rice grains. Instead, the rice grains will stick together, and the taste will be worse. He seemed like when he was talking to Kaylan, he seemed to be talking to himself. I've heard of this trick, but I've rarely cooked much myself, let alone fried rice. Kaylan said, although I have invited you to participate in this exploration operation, there is still one thing I want to do. I want to ask you. What's the matter? 33 did not raise his head, but focused all his attention on the ingredients in the pot. Onions, ginger, garlic, message, soy sauce, and other seasonings were added one by one, and an alluring fragrance gradually floated out of the small window. Why do you want to be hunters? Kaylan stared at 33's profile and said word for word, you spent the first half of your life in the wilderness, and you have been fighting with those ferocious indigenous creatures and fighting with various biochemical weapons left by the Alphas. The initial establishment of the Velociraptor team should have been 85 people, right? But in the end, including you, only 11 people survived to retire. 33's eyes twitched imperceptibly. He did not answer the question immediately, but continued to concentrate on stir-frying the ingredients in the pot. You can spend the rest of your life peacefully on the Ark. I have investigated your backgrounds and found that you are completely different from the two people I know. The entire Velociraptor team has been recognized as a combat hero, and no one as you were judged to be missing, and the pensions issued by the military were not withheld or delayed at all. Even if you don't work, you can live a very comfortable life with this honor and this money. Kaylan continued, but why do you want to become ruin hunters? I'm very curious. Logically speaking, after fighting for most of your life, it's time to take a rest, but you actually ran into the wilderness again. Could it be, really? Is it because you are too busy? Aren't I just resting like this? 33 was not angry because of this question, but laughed. He lifted up the heavy pot. Compared with the huge volume of the iron pot, the fried rice at the bottom of the pot looked only a small ball. Of course, this was just a visual illusion. When the fried rice came out of the pot, when it was shoveled out, it was still full of 3 large iron basins. Most of the people who come to eat here are rough people who work hard, and their appetites are not small. The tableware is naturally much larger than that of restaurants in residential areas and commercial areas. Kaylan conservatively estimates that if this pot of fried rice is used in a hotel, if you put it in an exquisite bone china rice bowl, it can hold at least 5 or 6 bowls. It's said to be tableware, but it's actually 3 small wash basins used for washing. Fortunately, the 2 girls I took with me this time, one is from the military and the other is a foodie, so there will be no waste of food. Here, you ordered fried rice. 33 handed 3 iron basins out of the window. To tell you the truth, I am a soldier. Apart from fried rice, I only know how to fight and have no other talents. Is it true that the fate of a soldier is to die in battle? There are many soldiers in history who returned home with honors, Kaylan said. Besides, cooking fried rice well is also a skill. There are so many people who have no talents. You are not living and working on the Ark. There is absolutely no need for you to engage in such dangerous work. Kaylan was still testing. Although 33's first impression was that he was not the kind of person who is easily stimulated and loses his mind, but some things should be asked clearly. Wait until he finds the problem in the ruins, then it's too late. Do you really want to know? 33 turned off the fire, turned around, and faced Kaylan. Think. Okay, you're right. After fighting those things for half a lifetime, we do feel tired and tired, 33 said slowly, but we are also curious. What is this thing? What kind of planet is this? What kind of problem is Alpha civilization, and what kind of enemies are we facing? We want to know the answers to these things, but the Ark can't give us the answers, so we can only find them ourselves. 33 paused and said, so we became relic hunters. Because of curiosity. Yes, in addition to curiosity, there is also some reluctance. 33 sighed, since you have investigated our background, you should also know that we were almost wiped out in the last mission. Okay, I know. The mission record has been modified. What we are facing is not a group of mutated indigenous creatures at all. Although the Velociraptor team is not the strongest force on the Ark, it is not forced into such a predicament by a group of beasts. When saying this, 33's momentum changed for a moment, but quickly returned to its original state. Our enemies are a group of monsters created by the Alpha civilization. Seed of erosion. No, it's not those things. 33 shook his head. Because of the confidentiality regulations, I can't tell you more details. But since then, I have become extremely curious about this dead civilization. It's not hatred, nor resentment, I just want to know how the civilization that created such a powerful monster came to perish. So that's it? I know curiosity kills the cat. But I don't feel like I can do that by letting me lie down in the Ark until I can walk. It's understandable, Kaylan nodded with deep understanding. A large part of the reason why I chose the profession of ruin hunter was also out of curiosity. Of course, the main reason is that the income is higher than being a wage earner. Then with your current net worth and income, why do you continue to stay on the front line? 33 suddenly turned from defense to offense and asked Kaylan, you have much more resources and choices than us, you can be a general instead of a pawn. Ha, I have no choice but to do it. In fact, I don't have many choices. Kaylan gave an expression that could barely be called a bitter smile. Forget it, let's not talk about it for now. You can clean up the store. Come on, after dinner, I will take you to the hunting group headquarters to register for the corresponding procedures. It will take you an entire afternoon just to fill in the pile of documents and forms, and this is something you have no choice about. Research Institute, headquarters, a biochemical laboratory. A young researcher wearing full protective clothing is carefully using a syringe to draw out the contents of a sealed test tube. On the experimental table in front of him is an experimental glove box with a petri dish inside. There was a piece of irregular flesh that was squirming slightly. Behind him stood a senior researcher who was also wearing a full protective suit. A little further away, there were two security personnel holding shields and holding automatic firearms in their hands. Professor, do you really want to do this? This is against the regulations. After completing the previous step, the young researcher turned back and said to the person standing behind him with some embarrassment. We have tried every attempt that does not violate the regulations without making any progress. The person known as Professor said, science must have a spirit of adventure, otherwise, mankind and the times will stagnate. But don't waste time. The survival time of this specimen is at most 4 minutes. Don't waste it, the professor said sternly with an emphasis on his tone. Yes. The young researcher put the syringe into the experimental glove box and clamped it with a robotic arm. For the first time, the experiment of implanting the active cells of the seed of erosion into the special sample clone culture has begun. The robotic arm moved slowly, aiming the needle of the syringe at the squirming irregular mass of flesh. The young researcher held his breath, found the correct position, inserted the needle into the meat at an even speed, and then started to push the syringe's plunger. The professor standing behind him opened his eyes involuntarily and grasped the back of the chair tightly with both hands. P.S. Thanks to book friend 1606282228293339 for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 559. Slow down, keep a constant speed, and always observe the status of the puncture point. Those who can be selected into the academy are all combinations of geniuses and elites. If you take any one of these people out, they will be at the level of academic masters. If you put them in outside colleges, they will at least have the title of full professor. Despite this, but the professor still guided the young researcher's operations as if he was treating a student who had just started. In the old era, this scene would have been as funny as an academician of the Academy of Sciences instructing a mathematics professor from a first-class university on how to solve a quadratic equation of one variable. But at this moment, the young researcher's fingers were trembling. He has conducted not 1,000 nor even 800 similar inoculation experiments. Among the researchers at the same time, he was even more famous for his three virtues: bold, cautious, and steady. Otherwise, he would not have been asked by the professor to serve as an assistant in this experiment. But for some reason, those hands that were usually as stable as precision machinery couldn't stop shaking involuntarily. He didn't dare to tell the professor behind him. Fortunately, the robotic arm of the experimental box was controlled by a CNC system, not the high-sensitivity sensor handle. Otherwise, the robotic arm in the box would probably shake now. It's a sieve. The young researcher did not even dare to take a breath. He stared at the experimental box and the control panel of the CNC system at the same time. His fingers were tapping rapidly on the keyboard, modifying various parameters of the robotic arm based on the feedback results from the sensors. Less than half of the serum-like substance in the syringe has been injected into the mass of meat, and the frequency of the meat's peristalsis gradually slowed down. What's going on? Did you inject a muscle relaxant into the specimen? Seeing the meat's reaction, the professor was stunned and asked immediately. No, the young researcher quickly replied, according to what you said, except for LCL liquid and living cells from the seat of erosion, I did not inject it with any auxiliary drugs. Then what's going on? The activity of the specimen seems to be rapidly weakening. The professor glanced at the timing note that had just been torn off the table, and then looked up at the timer hanging on the wall. This is not. It is possible that the supply of nutrients is cut off for less than 10 minutes. According to the previously obtained data, the physiological function of the specimen will begin to fail at least 15 minutes later. I don't know. The young researcher shook his head. Could it be that the specimen reacted to the cells of the seat of erosion? Absolutely impossible. The incubation period of the cells of the seat of corrosion is only a few hours at the shortest. How could it be possible during the inoculation process? Before he could finish his words, a low-pitched but extremely harsh scream came from the experimental box. Not only were the two of them startled, but even the security personnel standing behind were startled. Trembling subconsciously. Don't move. The professor stretched out a palm to signal the two security personnel to put down their guns, and then focused all his attention on the pieces of meat in the experimental box. All the contents of the syringe had been pushed into the meat, the needle was pulled out, and a drop of bright red blood was squeezed out from the eye of the needle. The sound just now was made by it. The professor pushed the lower frame of the goggles with the heel of his palm and asked in a deep voice. Should it be? The young researcher trembled and said, but, Professor, this specimen, it shouldn't have differentiated vocal organs. How can it be sharp? How about calling? Perhaps it's the muscle cavity inside the specimen that makes the sound of air being sucked in due to muscle contraction. The professor murmured, but even he found this explanation unacceptable. This specimen underwent a comprehensive examination before being sent to the experimental box, including tomography and B ultrasound. If there was really a muscle cavity inside, it should have been discovered long ago, instead of taking it now. Everyone in the laboratory was shocked. Is it an acute mutation? Such a thought flashed through the professor's mind, and his breathing became rapid. If it is really an acute mutation, it means that there is a chimerism point between the genes of this specimen and the genes of the erosion seed, so it is directly skip the incubation period after the seed of corrosion cells infect other organisms. Regardless of whether this mutation is good or bad, this is an unprecedented major breakthrough. The professor clenched his fists in excitement, but what he didn't expect was that more drastic changes were yet to come. 15 seconds after injecting the erosion seed cells into the piece of meat, the peristalsis of the piece of meat had basically stopped completely. Just when the young researcher thought that the physiological function of the piece of meat had completely failed, he planned to apply to the professor for using electric current to stimulate the specimen. At that time, a large number of blood bubbles suddenly appeared on the meat noodles. These blood bubbles expanded rapidly and then burst, but what flowed out of them was not bright red blood, but a gray-white thick liquid, which also contained a lot of rotten cotton-like tissue. Failed, the young researcher's heart skipped a beat, but for some reason, he didn't feel too depressed, but rather felt a sense of relief. No, there is no failure, the professor's excited voice came from behind, it's still alive. It's not dead. These corrupt tissues are just impurities excreted by it. It is purifying itself, it is evolving. Teach, Professor. The young researcher couldn't help but turn around and glance at the professor behind him, but was almost startled by the professor's crazy expression. What do you want me to do? Quickly, clean the surface of the specimen and remove those dirty things. Okay. The researcher nodded mechanically, controlled the robotic arm to pick up an alcohol cotton ball, and gently wiped it on the surface of the meat. Blood bubbles were still forming, and the overflowing thick liquid and flocculent tissue had covered the bottom of the petri dish and was about to overflow from the edge. The young researcher quickly used another robotic arm to pick up the gauze and suction it, but at this moment, the piece of meat that had stopped moving suddenly began to twitch. Stop! Don't touch it yet, the professor shouted. Are you recording it? Always recording, the young researcher nodded. I saw a large number of spherical bulges suddenly appearing on the surface of the meat piece, not the blood bubbles just now, but as if there was something hard underneath, pushing up the fascia on the surface of the meat piece. Could it be the core of the seed of corrosion? The professor quickly glanced at the timer screen with the corner of his eye. 76 seconds, there has never been a core energy of the seed of corrosion. It's a completely new record that took shape in such a short period of time. Professor, the young researcher's voice was a little difficult. There has never been any erosion species, even mutant species, that can have so many cores, never at this time. The number of spherical protrusions on the surface of the meat had exceeded 30, and there were more. It continues to increase, and the bulges in some places even gather together, forming a pile of excess like grapes squeezed together. Professor, are you sure these bumps are the core of the seed of erosion? The young researcher couldn't help but ask. Not sure, but it's most likely, the professor said. Look, through the fascia with the transparent membrane on the surface, you can see that there is a transparent hard shell on the surface of the thing inside, except for the core of the erosion seed. What else could have such a structure? As if to answer his question, as soon as the professor finished speaking, a crack suddenly appeared on the surface of the largest spherical protrusion. It was like a reptile suddenly opened its eyes, and what appeared in front of the professors and researchers? It was an eyeball covered with bloodshot eyes. The young researcher's hand shook involuntarily, and the cell phone placed on the table suddenly hit the ground and made a soft splat sound. The sound was very sudden, and the eyeball seemed to be frightened by the sound. They spun around in a circle and focused on the professor's face, making eye contact with him. The other spherical protrusions on the surface of the meat also cracked open at this time, and 30 or 40 eyeballs looked at the professor in unison. The professor subconsciously took a step back. With so many eyes staring at him, even he couldn't help but feel a little scared inside. But what's more exciting is that although the things under these bulbous protrusions are not the nucleus of the erosion seed, at least the tumor-like mass of flesh has successfully differentiated into complete eyeballs, and by observing the behavior of these eyeballs, inside the piece of meat, there should be a visual signal processing center, connected to these eyeballs through an organ similar to the optic nerve. Not only that, this processing center can also control the muscles around the eyeball, allowing the eyeball to rotate, search for and lock on the target. This is a fully functional vision system. The idea of experimentation is right. The active cells of the seed of erosion can completely act as a catalyst for the specimen, allowing these cloned cells that would otherwise only continue to divide and proliferate like malignant tumors to differentiate and form functional organs. According to this idea, it may be possible to completely clone the source of the specimen, the object that is not allowed to be studied. They will change history. Humanity's technological level will climb to a peak that has never been reached, and his name will also be engraved on the monument of that peak. In the old days, this was an ability that only gods had, but now, they can do it too. The joy and excitement in the professor's heart could not be greater, but what he didn't notice was that when the researcher sitting at the table saw such a scene, he didn't say a word and just sat on the chair so calmly. Well, this young man has a good psychological quality. He calmed down so quickly, maybe he is a seedling that can be cultivated, the professor thought to himself. His name should be signed at the back of this research report. Go, or simply transfer his files to yourself and let him be your exclusive assistant. Now, try using a light source to induce the specimen, observe its reaction and record it. The professor calmed down and said to the assistant researcher in as calm a voice as possible. But the former turned a deaf ear to his instructions and sat motionless in his chair. Hello? What's wrong with you? The professor reached out and patted the young researcher on the shoulder. The latter slowly turned his head, causing the rest of the professor's words to get stuck in his throat, unable to come out. The young researcher's face was covered with dense cracks. Under each crack, there was a bloodshot eyeball. These dozens of eyeballs turned to stare at the professor, but the eyes that originally belonged to the researcher were dull and blank. This. The professor pushed the researcher to the ground and stumbled back several steps. The researcher's body had froze. He did not get up from the ground, but turned his head with some difficulty and continued to stare directly at the professor with his dozens of eyeballs. You two, seal off this laboratory immediately. Don't get close to him and the specimens, the professor said to the two security personnel who were at a loss what to do. I'm going to call someone to deal with the scene. Before I come back, don't let me go. Anyone come into this lab. Got it? Obviously, I understand. The two security personnel replied, their bodies trembling with fear. Although they were not sure what happened in the experiment, the researcher who fell on the ground had a look on his face. They can still see the densely packed eyes, that terrifying face, just one glance at it, and they can no longer erase it from their memory. But even if they turned their heads and no longer looked at the researchers on the ground and the specimens on the table, they could still feel that the eyes of those entities were resting on them. The professor quickly walked through the disinfection room, took off his goggles and protective clothing, and stuffed them into the trash can with a biohazard sign. Then he took the disinfectant from the shelf and put it into the trash can. I poured half a bottle into it. It shouldn't be like this. This is impossible. There is no contact at all. Why is it contaminated? This is impossible. There must be a flaw in the experimental procedures. Damn it. The professor walked out while muttering to himself, but at this moment, he suddenly felt an unbearable itching on the inside of his arm. He stopped, and the look on his face suddenly changed drastically. He hesitated for several seconds before slowly stroking his cuffs. On the inside of his arm, from his wrist to his elbow, there were more than a dozen rounded spherical bumps that appeared inexplicably. The largest of them looked as if they were about to crack. P.S. Conventional disclaimer: all the content in this book involving scientific knowledge is fictional for the needs of the plot. Any similarity is purely coincidental. Please do not take it personally. The author himself is a scumbag, with a very low level of education. He knows nothing about this kind of high-end knowledge. Please be gentle with your words and don't criticize or criticize. This is a novel, not an academic paper. Just read it for fun, don't take it seriously. PPS Thanks to book friend 201807040217593962 for the 1500 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 560. This is impossible, this is impossible, this is impossible. The professor desperately recalled every detail of what had just happened. He was very sure that when he took off his protective clothing, his skin had absolutely no protection against the risk of contamination. There was contact with the surface of the suit. Even if he was a little panicked, every move he made was carried out according to standard procedures. This kind of operation has become a habit for him, who has been in the biochemical laboratory for more than 20 years. With muscle memory, it is impossible to make any mistakes in any step. Then why was he still infected by the specimen? Why? 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 He grabbed his wrist with some pain. He could clearly feel that under the bulging flesh sac, the eyeballs were turning crazily, like some kind of biological larvae about to break out of their shells. How could it be like this? Which link is the problem? The professor squatted down, gritting his teeth and thinking hard. At this moment, gunshots suddenly came from the laboratory behind him. It was the gunfire of a small caliber assault rifle equipped with a silencer, and it was the two security personnel who fired. The moment the gunfire rang out, the laboratory's automatic alarm device was also triggered, and the piercing alarm sounded throughout the building. Damn, why did they shoot? The professor felt as if his head was about to burst. He struggled to turn around and was about to turn back, but the strength in his body seemed to have been drained. As soon as he took a step, he lost his balance and fell heavily. Fell to the ground. The gunshots stopped, but the sirens continued. The professor could vaguely hear rapid footsteps coming from the stairs at the end of the corridor. He wanted to speak and let people stay away, but he couldn't make a sound. Bah, bang. A creepy sound came from the arm, and the spherical raised surfaces were like ripe fruits. The skins burst open one after another. The bloodshot eyeballs broke away from the darkness and looked at their own owner. The professor's eyes and the gazes of these dozen or so eyeballs immediately met. At this moment, the professor was shocked to find that he saw two images at the same time, his arm and his face. The former picture comes from his own eyes, while the latter picture comes from the eyeballs that grow out of his arms. Could it be that these eyeballs are actually connected to their own visual system? Are they invaders parasitic in one's own body, or are they part of one's own body? The people who came after hearing the siren gradually ran closer, but to the professor's ears, their footsteps seemed to be getting farther and farther away and fainter. His own vision was gradually becoming blurry, but the eyes on his arm still saw things very clearly. Vaguely, the professor seemed to be able to feel the thoughts of these eyeballs. They seemed to be looking for a new target. In the moment before the professor's consciousness disappeared, he suddenly understood why he was infected. These things seemed to be transmitted between organisms without direct contact at all, only. The professor's consciousness was forever plunged into darkness. The people who came to the rescue finally ran to the professor. They did not immediately help the professor, who fell on the ground, but pointed their weapons at the professor. At this moment, all the exposed parts of the professor's body were covered with large and small grape-like spherical protrusions. These fleshy balls were squeezing and accumulating each other, making it impossible to see the professor's original body. His appearance is just like that of a very famous leper in the old era. But leprosy has long been conquered, and now the only remaining leprosy pathogens in the world are stored in the underground vault of the Institute. "It's not leprosy," shouted a researcher who came to provide support. "The course of leprosy is not so rapid. Even the mutant strain cannot develop like this. Be careful. Those lumps, the things underneath seem to be moving," another researcher wearing a heavy protective suit said. "Could it be something from the Alpha civilization?" The researcher who spoke at the beginning glanced at the work badge that fell next to the body and asked, "The infected person is Professor Smith. Do any of you know what research topics Professor Smith has recently done? There seems to be a research topic. I saw him reporting to the leader of the biomedical group 2 days ago, and he also applied for a young researcher to be an assistant, but the content of the topic is confidential, and no relevant personnel are involved. Can't check. Oops. Now things are in trouble. Notify the entire biomedical team to seal off this building. No one is allowed to enter without permission. In addition, contact the team leader immediately. Others don't know what Professor Smith is researching. Team leader: I definitely know. Wait a minute. Professor Lee, look at Professor Smith's arm. Then, what is that?" Everyone looked in the direction of the man's finger, and when they saw those rolling eyes, a female researcher screamed on the spot and fell to the ground. She struggled to get up from the ground, but the next second, she found that her colleagues around her were retreating with frightened faces. Even the man who was clearly in love with her and who was usually attentive to her from time to time, at this time he also hid behind others, let alone helping him. Looking at him like that, he seemed to want to be as far away from him as possible. What happened? The young female researcher was stunned. She found that everyone's eyes were focused on her face, so she stretched out her hand and carefully touched her face. She touched a few round, hard objects with a warm touch, like glass balls wrapped in skin. That doesn't belong to her. She shouldn't have this on her face. The female researcher's mind collapsed instantly. Her 5 fingers were bent directly into claws, trying to pull the meatballs off her face, but the severe pain from the connection between the meatballs and muscles made her unbearable. She screamed, "Wow!" The roots of these growths penetrated deeply into the flesh. In other words, they and her face were originally one. This speed of transmission, the biosafety level is definitely level 4 or higher. Professor Lee, who spoke at the beginning, suddenly turned pale. The pathogen is unknown, the route and method of transmission are unknown, and the symptoms are unknown. Everyone, leave quickly. This corridor. But you are not allowed to leave this building. Find an unoccupied room nearby for isolation. In addition, notify those who have just heard the alarm and fled the building to self-isolate on the spot. And immediately use communication equipment to report the crisis report to the processing department. Professor Lee, save me, save me. Seeing everyone leaving quickly, the infected female researcher cried and crawled towards Professor Lee, but when she raised her head, she saw Lee. The professor held a pistol in his trembling hand, and the black muzzle was pointed at his head. "Karen, if you come close again, I will shoot," Professor Lee shouted in a deep voice. "You have been infected by this unknown pathogen. I really want to save you, but I can't do anything. I can't even guarantee that I will be with you. The safety of others, we can only wait for the crisis management department to solve the problem. You stay here, stay with Professor Smith, and don't go anywhere, otherwise." Before Professor Lee finished speaking, the female researcher sped up. "No. I don't want to stay here. I can't wait for the people from the crisis management department to come over. I know how they deal with this kind of thing. I will be thrown into the incinerator as contaminants, or, to be sent to the autopsy table as a research subject. No. I don't want to die. Save me. Save me." Seeing that the female researcher was about to crawl closer, Professor Lee took a deep breath, closed his eyes, muttered "I'm sorry" silently, and then pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound of gunfire rang out throughout the building, echoing through the hallways. Hearing the gunfire, the male researcher who liked Karen hesitated slightly, but there was no obvious change in the expression on his face. He quickly found an unoccupied cubicle and ducked in. He locked the door smoothly. He did like Karen, but what he liked was just her pretty face and sexy figure. He was courting Karen just to get her body. But Karen's appearance just now brought him only fear and nausea. What Professor Lee killed was not Karen, but an inhuman monster, he kept muttering to himself, walked quickly to the shelf, took down a bottle of disinfectant from the top, unscrewed the bottle cap, and frantically poured it on yourself. Karen is dead, huh, but at least I'm still alive. He exhaled a long breath, and couldn't help but feel glad that he didn't rush to kill that woman. Oh no, it should be that monster. Help him up, otherwise, he must be infected now. That woman is an idiot. The alarm that sounded in the biomedical team building was most likely due to the leakage of some dangerous pollutant, so the people who came to support all wore protective clothing, but she didn't wear any protective equipment. Idiot woman, you deserve to be infected and die unjustly, he cursed secretly. I almost got involved. It seems that the unknown pathogen may be spread through the air. I wore a full suit. I'm sure nothing will happen to my protective suit. Well, just to be on the safe side, I kept it on until the people from the crisis management department came over. Unfortunately, there was only this bottle of disinfectant at hand. If there were more, he would have even wanted to wear protective clothing and take a bath with disinfectant. But just as he was scanning the room for anything useful, an inexplicable itching suddenly came from his back. What the hell? Is it because the protective clothing is too airtight, the clothes soaked with sweat stick to the back, irritating the skin? But I don't have the kind of skin that is prone to allergies. He wanted to reach his hands behind his back. I went to scratch it twice, but the protective clothing was too thick and the wearer was not allowed to make such movements at all. Damn, it's so itchy, it's so itchy. This unbearable itching feeling made him almost crazy, but he didn't dare to take off the protective clothing. He had no choice but to lean his back against the wall. On it, rubbing it back and forth, trying to relieve the itching with friction. But within 2 moments, he realized that something seemed wrong. There seemed to be some lumps on his back. When he pressed against the wall, he could clearly feel these hard lumps being pressed into the flesh. Bursts of a sore feeling came from the connection between the lump and the muscle. At the same time, the new East 9th District. If you want to return to the hunting group headquarters, besides private transportation, the fastest way is to take the inter-district light rail. However, when Kaylan and others just arrived at the station, they saw the last train just leaving the platform. If I had caught up half a minute earlier. Qin Zhao lifted his hair that was wet with sweat on his forehead. They watched the train pull into the station, but at that time they were still more than 200 meters away from the station. Nearly 300 meters away. If there are no passengers in the station, a train will only stay for 30 seconds at most, and 30 seconds is 300 meters. Unless you are an enhanced person, it will be difficult to rush into the station before the train starts, let alone return. You have to buy a ticket at the gate. In peripheral industrial areas like this with a small population, if you miss a train, you will have to wait for an hour or more for the next one. There are many trains entering and leaving the industrial area, but most of them are trucks transporting industrial equipment and materials. These trucks are not open to ordinary people, and they do not take regular train routes. Therefore, they could only choose another shortcut, crossing the newly built East 9th District, then rent a hovercraft in East 8th District and return to the hunting group headquarters. It has been several months since the new East 9th District was completed, but very few residents have moved into it. Many blocks are still uninhabited, and most of the shops facing the street are still in rough condition. Occasionally, there were several renovated stores, but their doors were closed and signs saying opening soon were hung. I feel that the newly built East 9th District is not even as prosperous as the East 10th District. Kaylan pointed to the uninhabited houses and said, "These are the lowest standard housing, the kind that are not even equipped with smart housekeepers. Does the official plan to turn this place into a slum? According to the geographical location of East 9th District, there should be more people here soon, but it will definitely not be comparable to before," 33 said. The reason why the East 9th District was so prosperous in the first place was simply because this was the residence of the Arezaka Foundation. As the local leader of the East 9th District, the Arezaka Foundation would naturally manage this land well. But now, the Arezaka Consortium is gone, and there seems to be nothing in the newly built East 9th District that can attract investment from large consortiums. "I have an idea, I want to move the hunting group's headquarters here," Kaylan said suddenly. P.S. Thanks to Changuliuya for the silent reward of 10,000 starting coins, the 30th helmsman of this book was officially born, thanks to Zushuj for the 600 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 561. Why, Qin Zhao was stunned for a moment and asked, "Isn't our current headquarters very good, a prosperous location, spacious space, and various supporting civil facilities? If we move here, we don't have to start from scratch." "The current headquarters is good, but the advantages you mentioned are also disadvantages," Kaylan analyzed one by one. "First of all, the location is prosperous. Yes, the East 4th District, the Shentang Business District, can indeed be regarded as an inch of land. The land price in this prime location is even more expensive than most land in the 3rd District. If we have too much money to spend, this is indeed a good choice. But it is too expensive. According to the original plan, we did not plan to choose the current address for our headquarters. This building in the Shentang Business District was half sold and half given to us by the Ye family group. Otherwise, it would have been with the funds we had at that time. There was no way we could afford to rent this kind of office building, let alone a whole building. With the rent in this contract, it was estimated that we could rent half a floor as an office in the Shentang Business District. We can't even talk about it." Kaylan and others knew in their hearts that the current headquarters building of the God Hunting Group was actually given to them by the Ye Consortium, and asking Thor Heavy Industries to collect the rent was actually just a meaning. If the Ye Corporation had known at that time that you would become the person in charge of Yagunactor, it is estimated that the contract was not a lease but a sale at a low price. 33 interjected, "The people of the Ye Corporation are very discerning. It's vicious, but it's a pity that they were a little petty when they invested. Even if they gave it directly at that time, we wouldn't dare to ask for it. The recipient is short-handed. Who knows what kind of price it will cost to repay such a big gift at that time." Kaylan shook his head. "Although we are now with the relationship between Yes Consortium is in the honeymoon period, but no one is sure what will happen in the future. Allies maintained by interest relationships are not reliable, and we must find a way out for ourselves." "It makes sense," 33 nodded, while Qin Zhao fell into silence, seeming to be thinking about something. "Secondly, the land in the Shentang Business District is almost saturated. Although all supporting facilities are complete, there is no room for continued expansion." Kaylan continued, "I have previously investigated all the properties within 1 kilometer of the headquarters. Shops, without exception, are all backed by powerful consortiums. With the support of a steady flow of cash flow, these shops will not go bankrupt even if they operate at a loss, even if those consortiums want to give up. The store will not transfer the store and land, but will digest it internally and let other companies under the consortium take over, or simply transform." Kaylan smiled and said, "If the Ye Group is just for gifts, how could Raytheon Heavy Industries give up such a prime location store? To be honest with you, the news just came out that Raytheon Heavy Industries plans to sublease this building to us. When it was released, its stock price fell by 4 percentage points in an instant, which shows how important this store is to Thor Heavy Industries. Indeed, we went to the Shentang business district when we were purchasing equipment. The Raytheon Heavy Industries store there, which is the current headquarters of your God Hunting Group, had a lot of traffic. At that time, all their new products would be sold. Priority is given to displaying it there. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is the offline flagship store of Thor Heavy Industries. Transferring the flagship store will definitely have an impact on the stock price, 33 said solemnly. Although he claimed that he knew nothing but fighting, this was obviously a self-effacing statement. Yes, so we want to expand by acquiring other stores, and the money we need to spend will be an astronomical figure. Kaylan nodded. Although our current headquarters building has enough space, you must know our entire hunting group now has less than 10 hunters in total. When the hunting group expands, one building will definitely not be enough. A standard consortium-level hunting group requires at least 4 or 5 football fields of land just for the 3 major items of training camp, equipment warehouse, and workshop, not to mention buildings such as employee dormitories. It requires, the old subordinates of Hound now all live in the 7th district or even further back. It takes more than 4 hours for them to commute to and from get off work every day. In addition to the commercial district in the East 4th district, the rest of the residential areas are all high-end communities, which are not what we can afford. I made a rough calculation. If we want to buy 4 football field-sized land in Shentang Business District, based on the current quotation per square meter, we will probably need. Qin Zhao took out his mobile phone and pressed a button, and then began to count the long series of zeros, 10, hundreds, thousands, well, so far, it's hundreds of millions, 1 billion, tens of billions, it takes almost 470 billion. Even she herself was shocked by the calculated number. 47 billion is still a conservative estimate. This thing cannot be calculated based on the average price. Kaylan sighed. As long as you show your intention to expand and acquire, the surrounding land will directly start to raise prices. Now it will be at this price only if no one wants to buy it. When someone really wants to buy it, it will not be available at this price. Not only that, the more area you acquire, the more expensive the remaining land will be. For example, I want to acquire 50,000 square meters of land, and if I buy it per unit of 5,000 square meters, the price of the last 5,000 square meters may rise to more than 10 times that of the first 5,000 square meters. This is not an exaggeration at all. Kaylan paused and then said, according to my idea, the building in the Shentang Business District can be left to serve as an office and liaison station, and the headquarters of the hunting group can be moved to the newly built East 9 District, and invested in the construction of several communities to serve as dormitories for employees' families. To be honest, although the Arazaka Consortium is our enemy, I quite like their original national China business model, but I guess it will cause trouble. After this incident, ARC officials should strengthen their control over each block. The expenses of a consortium-level hunting group are not just a play, and only those large consortiums with strong financial resources can afford to spend this money. Otherwise, they would not be named Consortium Level 33 side. When my brothers and I were thinking about changing careers to become relic hunters, we also thought about registering a hunting group, but in the end, we decided to make our debut as independent hunters. Why? If there is a hunting group organization, will it have the right to have priority when accepting tasks? Most of the tasks that independent hunters can receive are leftovers picked by those hunting groups. Jean Zaoran kept asking. We did some research at that time and found out that to set up a hunting group, the various fees that need to be paid every month are tens of thousands. Of course, if the hunters under the name of the hunting group are very active, they can use the activity gained from exploring the ruins. The money was used to offset most of the fees and taxes. This money was originally intended to prevent someone from using the name of a shell hunting group to obtain information, but the problem was that the few of us did not go on missions frequently, and we did not want to attract a large number of new people. In the end, I can only give up. If you choose to join someone else's hunting group, there are exploration targets that need to be completed every month. If you fail to meet them, your salary will be reduced or even fired. We still prefer the feeling of freedom and do not want to be controlled by others, so we became lone hunters. 33 continued, I think most people who regard exploring ruins as a hobby or side job should make this choice. For any existing consortium-level hunting group, it is impossible to recover the initial investment costs and turn losses into profits within 10 or 20 years. Kaylan shrugged, but for the top-level ruins information, we have no choice. You are among the top elite hunters, and you take on the most difficult missions. The reward for one of your missions is enough to equal the harvest of 100 middle-level hunters for several years, but your method also has obvious drawbacks. It's just that the risk is too high. As long as there is an accident, the entire army will be wiped out. And this kind of accident is too common in S-class and A-class ruins. Ha, of course I know that. I heard the employees below say more than once that we are just rushing to die. Kaylan smiled, but it's strange to say that since we started to form a team, so far, there has been no less than one person, which can only be explained by good luck. After all, in A-class and S-class ruins, humans are no different from ants. No matter how strong they are, any mechanism can do it. It's going to kill you. Then why do you still want to explore the ruins yourself? 33 asked again. According to the normal development trajectory, your hunting group is like walking on a tightrope, relying entirely on the support of a few of you. As long as if an accident occurs during the exploration process, the entire hunting group will naturally fall apart, and it is only a matter of time before the accident occurs. If you maintain the current status quo, I guarantee that your hunting group will not survive even 5 years. But now, an opportunity that others only dream of is before your eyes. This is an opportunity that can completely change the fate of the hunting god hunting group. With the development rights of the new S-class ruins, you can recruit others to help you. You work part-time and accumulate a lot of wealth and resources, so that the hunting group can embark on a healthy development trajectory. There is absolutely no need for you to take risks. You are different from us. 33 sighed, those of us who want to find out the truth of the matter will do it ourselves, but if it were you, sitting on the sofa in the office, someone would tell you the details. The exploration report will be delivered to your desk, right? If you think so, you are totally wrong. Kaylan stared at the other party and said word by word, practice can only give you true knowledge, only what you see, hear, and touch with your own eyes, can be considered the truth. 33 was stunned, and even the steps under his feet stopped. He paused for a moment, then took steps to follow, and asked in a deep voice, what is it that you want to find out? The truth. To be honest, I don't know either. Kaylan shook his head. The four of them passed through a construction site piled with building materials. This was already the edge of the new East 9th District. Logically speaking, these construction sites should be in full swing at this time, but along the way, they continued to not a single worker was seen. Only unmanned construction machinery was parked there. Many lighting lines in the new East 9th District were not powered yet, and these machinery looked like giant monsters dormant in the shadows. On the road that has been completed on the side, there are several no-traffic road signs placed. No access? What's going on? Qin Zhao glanced at the navigation software on his phone. This road should be passable. Why is it closed? Of course you can walk on this road. If this road is closed to traffic, the construction materials on the construction site will not be transported at all. 33 pointed at several large trucks parked on the roadside and said. Then these brands. It was put up temporarily. Kaylan said, the East 8th District is blocked. As soon as he finished speaking, a group of garrison soldiers suddenly turned out from the corner of the street. As soon as they saw the four of them, a dazzling searchlight beam directly covered their heads and faces. Who is that person there? Where did he come from? a soldier shouted. We are relic hunters, coming from the East 10th District. We missed the train, so we plan to pass through here and go to the East 8th District to find transportation, Kaylan replied. Don't go any further, the front is blocked. Put your hands where we can see, and slowly come towards us, we will take you to the nearest containment facility. Blocked? Did something happen in the East 8th District? Kaylan asked, suddenly having a bad feeling. Not only the East 8th District, but the entire Ark is also under emergency blockade. So if you turn around and go back, the East 10th District won't let you in, the soldier said. What's going on? The whole ship is blocked, Kaylan shouted in his heart that something was wrong. At first, he thought that there was another container with corrosive seeds mixed on the Ark, but even in this case, at most it is impossible to blockade the whole ship after blocking several areas. In his impression, after the Ark landed on Alpha Planet, there was only one blockade of the whole ship. That time it was because a group of extremely fierce flying creatures attacked from the air. Ark, and invaded the interior of Ark. In order to reduce civilian casualties as much as possible, the Parliament issued an order to block the entire ship. But after several large fleets of Ark were established, this kind of thing never happened again. Could it be that something has invaded again this time? And, is it the kind of thing that even the Undead Crew Association can't handle in a while? It says it is an acute infectious disease with high infection and fatality rates. The soldier had a pretty good temper and patiently explained to Kaylan and others, don't ask so many questions, we know in fact, they are not much more than you. Where is the outbreak of the infectious disease? This can tell us, right? I don't know, the soldier shook his head. The order we received is to seal the borders of each block. You are lucky. After a while, the wall will probably be lowered. If you are imprisoned in Zindong in District 9, I'm afraid even eating is a problem. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 562. Has the situation become this serious? Kaylan was a little stunned. The last time the block separation wall was lowered, it was an order issued to round up the most dangerous element after the Prophet attacked the Security Bureau's stronghold. After that, the separation wall was no longer available. Has not been enabled. Even in the Arezaka Consortium incident, the East 9th District was blocked by a defense line composed of the Security Bureau and the garrison, not an alloy wall several meters thick. These separation walls, like the whole ship blockade, are equivalent to the last barrier of Ark. If even this barrier is broken through, it means that the current crisis is no longer able to make Ark's top management take care of ordinary people. Life. If you change it to a more refined word, it would be, life is ruined. There are 50 million civilians on the Ark. After excluding the large families and conglomerates with private armed forces, as well as the mercenaries, relic hunters, and retired soldiers with certain combat effectiveness, the remaining 40 million people are at least without fighting. Ordinary people with abilities, except for shooting a few times with Type 01 rifles in popular military training, throughout their lives, these people will never have any interaction with words such as weapons and combat. When disaster strikes, the only thing they can rely on is the shelter from the top of the Ark, and those 6 to 8 meter thick composite armored isolation walls are the last official insurance for them. The entire ship is blocked and the separation wall is lowered, which means that the connections between the various blocks will be completely cut off, transportation will be interrupted, logistics will be blocked, and the production and life of everyone in the Ark will be completely stopped. Not to mention anything else, just count the economic losses. The loss caused by every minute of blockade may be measured in units of 100 million. Unless it is absolutely necessary, the Joint Parliamentary Group, no, the Joint Parliamentary Group is probably not qualified to issue such an order yet. It should be said this way, it is impossible for the immortal crew to activate this plan unless it is absolutely necessary. What happened? Kaylan asked again. However, the soldier just glanced at him and did not answer. Seeing this, 33 quickly walked forward, approached the sergeant with the highest rank among the soldiers, and said, "Brother, we used to be from the 1st Division of the 1st Army Corps of the Field Force." As he spoke, he pulled up his sleeves, revealing a tattoo on his arm. "Seeing as we were all colleagues in the past, can you tell us some news so that we can feel a little more at ease?" After seeing the tattoo on 33's arm, the sergeant was stunned for a moment, and then immediately showed a look of awe. "The 1st Division of the 1st Regiment of the Field Force, that is known as the ace among aces. Except for the fleets and mecha units in the air, the most powerful unit in the human army belongs to the 1st Division. Countless soldiers have sharpened their heads and want to get into the 1st Division, but those who can succeed often fail. The screening conditions of the 1st Division are very strict. A soldier with enough strength to be selected into the Sharp Knife Company from other troops in the field army will only be ranked at the bottom in the 1st Division, let alone those under the 1st Division. An elite unit with a special number. The strength of the 1st Division can be said to be the strongest in the army, and the combat tasks they receive are often the most arduous. According to the statistics of the past 10 years, not counting the disabled and missing, the Field Corps has served for 5 years. The average battle fatality rate was 4 per thousand. The 5-year average combat fatality rate of the 1st Division is 25%. In other words, for every 100 soldiers who join the 1st Division, only 75 will be alive after 5 years. This is still the data that the war has been relatively relaxed in recent years. If we put it in the few years after the landing, it is estimated that after 5 years of fighting, there will not be a few veterans left in the entire 1st Division. The earliest batch of soldiers would have been it was all gone, and all that was left were reserve troops that were added later. Whether it is the field troops, the garrison troops, or the air fleet, which has always been above the top, when it comes to the 1st Division, there is only admiration and respect in their hearts. After the sergeant saw the tattoo symbolizing honor on 33's arm, he subconsciously saluted him with a standard military salute, and then said with an expression of embarrassment, "It's not that we don't want to tell you, it's actually us. I don't know, really, 20 minutes ago, our brothers were watching TV at the station, and suddenly we received this order, even we are still confused." Yes, several other soldiers from the garrison nearby also immediately agreed. "Brother, since you are a retired member of the 1st Division, you must know someone among the top brass of your army. You see, although the entire ship is blocked now, the communication lines have not been disabled. How about trying give me a call and ask," the sergeant asked kindly. "Based on this situation, the people I can contact, probably won't know many." 33 shook his head slightly, and then focused on Kaylan. In his opinion, since Kaylan is the captain of Yagunactor and the person in charge of this new S-class ruins, he must be familiar with the ARC's senior management, and maybe he will even join forces. The members of the parliamentary group all know several of them. A high-ranking official of this level must know the inside story. Who is the person with the greatest authority you can contact?" 33 asked Kaylan. "Do you know the members of the joint parliamentary group?" Kaylan shook his head. "Just kidding, how could I possibly know the congressman?" The conversation between the two was overheard by the soldiers, who immediately looked at Kaylan with surprise. These soldiers never expected that besides a big boss who retired from the 1st Division, among the 4 people, there were actually a big shot who can build relationships with congressmen. But this big shot is really too young. Fortunately, Kaylan immediately denied 33's statement, otherwise, these soldiers' jaws would have been shocked to the ground. It's just that, although he doesn't know the congressman, he does know a group of guys who are more powerful than the congressman. "Wait a minute, I'll make a call." Kaylan took out his cell phone and dialed the number Demeter left for him. The ringing only lasted for 2 seconds before the call was connected. "What's going on?" In order to save time, Kaylan asked straight to the point. He believed that the other party must know what he was asking. "It's hard to explain on the phone," Demeter said. "You should follow this group of soldiers to the shelter first, and someone will come to find you soon." Kaylan raised his head and saw that the surveillance camera at the street entrance was facing here, and the red indicator light representing the working status was flashing rhythmically next to the camera. It is estimated that people from the Immortal crew are looking at him from behind the camera. For some reason, Kaylan suddenly felt the urge to make an international friendly gesture to the surveillance camera. "Why are you looking for me? To capture young men? Since you want me to do work, you must let me know the content of the work. The people who come to you later will tell you, but you need to be mentally prepared. Things are far more troublesome than you think," Demeter said in an extremely calm tone. But after hearing her words, Kaylan couldn't calm down. Damn, even the people from the undead crew said that this matter was far more troublesome than they thought. I guess it can no longer be described as troublesome. This is not trouble, this is disaster. Okay, I understand. Kaylan was silent for 2 seconds before responding. Beep. After receiving a positive reply, the other party hung up the phone without hesitation. After putting down the phone, Kaylan realized that everyone around him was staring at him, except for 33, Qin Zhao and Valentina. The eyes of the soldiers in the garrison were also full of curiosity. They are also human beings. If they take off their military uniforms and put down their guns, they will be no different from ordinary people. When encountering this kind of thing, they will inevitably have doubts, worries, fears, and other negative emotions in their hearts, especially in this situation where it is obvious that the sky is falling. However, without knowing anything, these negative emotions will be amplified hundreds or thousands of times. Compared with the civilians who just need to wait for rescue in the holding facility, these soldiers are the ones who really need to face this disaster. If the matter is really so serious that it is unspeakable, then perhaps the only thing waiting for them is, die. When the landing area was first opened, the advance legions who landed first knew that the battle would be fatal, but they still jumped out of the vehicle resolutely. But now, this kind of thing has happened to these soldiers. Superior. There were obviously some uncomfortable expressions on the faces of several young soldiers. When Kaylan and Demeter were on the phone just now, they did not deliberately avoid these people, and in the extremely quiet environment, the words leaked from the receiver. The sound was also transmitted to the ears of the people around him extremely clearly. Although the voices of both people on the call were calm, this calm was more like a calm before the storm. Thick dark clouds fell from the sky, making people feel as if they couldn't breathe. This short-lived. After the calm passes, they will face an unimaginable storm, and a powerful cyclone will sweep through, sweeping everything. Of course, there is no such climate landscape on planet Alpha, and Kaylan has only seen similar scenes in a science documentary from the old era, but using this scene to describe the current situation is extremely appropriate. "Brother, who is the person you just called?" the sergeant couldn't help but ask after thinking for a long time. "A friend," Kaylan said. Although the Immortal Crew Association acquiesced to these people listening to this call, it did not mean that Kaylan could tell them about the existence of the Immortal Crew Association. "Well, what is your friend's identity?" Unknowingly, the sergeant had already used the honorific title "you." "It's not really a member of the Joint Parliamentary Group, is it?" 33 interjected. He would rather believe that Ian's statement that he didn't know the member just now was just a joke. "She is not a member of parliament, but she is almost the same as a member of parliament," Kaylan said vaguely. He was right to say so. After all, the Joint Parliamentary Group is actually just a group of puppets. Those who actually perform the functions of the parliamentary group are actually this group of people hiding behind the scenes. "The congressman just now, no, it's the lady. She seemed to want you to handle this matter." The sergeant swallowed and continued to ask Kaylan, "Excuse me, who are you?" God hunting group, Kaylan didn't need to hide his identity. Oh, he's the one who made headlines recently, the person in charge of the S-019 ruins Agunakotaur. As soon as these words came out, the soldiers in the team looked sideways, and the sergeant couldn't help but open his mouth. He was stunned for several seconds before he realized, "I'm very sorry. We have caused you trouble. If necessary, we can arrange transportation for you now, and we should be able to send you out of the East 8th District before the wall is lowered." The sergeant couldn't help but shed a layer of dense beads of sweat in the palm of his hand that was holding the butt of his gun. He never imagined that he could stop a group of people at random and actually stop such a big man, and the most terrible thing was that he stopped a group of people casually. This big shot seems to be the key figure in solving this incident. Even if he did not violate any rules and regulations and could even be regarded as a conscientious soldier, his interception did delay the opportunity. If his actions caused a butterfly effect, I am afraid that shooting him 100 times would not be enough. Atoning. It's okay. Since the person asked me to wait at the shelter, let's go to the shelter quickly, Kaylan said. Ah, okay. I'll drive you there, the sergeant said quickly, and then turned to the other soldiers and said, "You continue to patrol along the edge of the new East 9th District, and if you find anyone lingering, you will immediately control them, collect them, and send them to a holding facility." "Yes," other soldiers responded. 15 minutes later. The temporary holding facility the sergeant called was actually a department store with the doors and windows sealed and several barricades surrounding the outside. The people brought in by various patrol teams were gathered in the second and third floors of the department store. On both floors, the containers were pushed to one side, and yellow and black warning tapes divided the entire building into dozens of areas, with 30 or 50 people gathered in each area. Some of these people were talking on the phone with anxious faces, some were sitting on the ground, frowning and staring at their phones, some were constantly chatting with the soldiers standing guard next to them, trying to get some information out of the soldiers' mouths. Come. Like Kaylan, they were all walking on the street and were suddenly brought here by the soldiers who came over. There were still some unwiped blood stains on the floor tiles at the door. I don't know if there was a stampede or violence. Conflict. "Mr. Kaylan, please wait here for a while. If someone comes to see you later, I will definitely inform you as soon as possible. In addition, I hope you don't tell the people here about what happened just now. I'm worried that it will cause trouble if the group panics. The situation will become difficult to control," the sergeant said to Kaylan. "Okay, of course I know that," Kaylan nodded. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 564. Kaylan and the four of them randomly found an isolation area where there were not too many people and sat down directly on the ground. As soon as Kaylan sat down, he felt someone behind him gently tugging on his sleeve. He turned around and found that the other person was a well-dressed middle-aged man, wearing a pair of thin-rimmed glasses and a meticulous suit and tie. Looking very gentle. If Kaylan hadn't noticed that the watch on the middle-aged man's wrist was a high imitation, he would have classified the middle-aged man into the upper class of ARC. A suit worth 3,000 to 4,000 yuan is paired with a genuine replica watch with an original price estimated at 300,000 yuan. Well, this guy is probably just a vain white-collar worker. To be honest, Kaylan doesn't like to deal with such people. Such people are too Philistine. They value interests more than anything else, but they are also careless. They don't have the stomach and courage of those in power, and they often do things for trivial matters. Benefit and evil. But this kind of people are not like the rough people at the bottom who will quarrel with people in person. Most of them like to play dirty tricks, such as secretly speaking ill of people behind their backs, causing obstacles, etc. This aspect is different from the previous Morgan Consortium. The things they did were pretty much the same. In addition, words such as following the crowd, bullying the weak and fearing the strong are also typical labels for this kind of people. It can be summed up in 3 words: not popular. Little brother, were you brought in by those soldiers? The middle-aged man asked with a smile. Yeah. What's the matter? Is something wrong? Kaylan tried his best to pretend to be confused. Well, I just saw that the soldier who brought you in seemed to have a very good attitude towards you. Do you know that soldier? I don't know. Kaylan shook his head. He just wanted to end this conversation as soon as possible and didn't want to have too much interaction with the other party. Then you must be a person of some status. Could you be the young master of a big family? To be honest, with so many people coming in, this is the first time I have seen those soldiers with such a good attitude. The smile on the young man's face turned into a flattering smile in an instant, and he pointed to the stitches on his shoulder. When we were brought in, it was like arresting prisoners, pushing and pulling. There was a young man who spoke a little harshly and got hit hard by the butt of a rifle, even his teeth were knocked out. When he said this, his tone was full of pain and resentment. It was obvious that this relatively high-end suit was very valuable to him. But he did not focus on his torn clothes, but focused on describing the young man who was violently enforced. Kaylan couldn't help but complained in his heart, this guy is really a scheming bitch. Then I can only tell you that you are completely wrong. I am just an ordinary person. The good attitude of those soldiers may be because a few of us are more cooperative, and then we happen to bump into a group of soldiers with good tempers. Seeing what Kaylan said, the middle-aged man showed a look of obvious disbelief in his eyes. However, he did not dwell on this matter. Instead, he cleverly changed the topic. Little brother, you know what's going on outside? What happened? They brought people here out of nowhere. This is illegal imprisonment. Even if they are the garrison, they have no right to restrict our personal freedom without justifiable reasons. Didn't you hear what was being said on the loudspeaker? A sudden outbreak of an acute infectious disease, and for the sake of people's safety, everyone must be quarantined. Kaylan pointed to the 2 loudspeakers in the mall that were playing loops, said the power speaker. No one would believe such a shitty excuse. This is a ship-wide blockade. What kind of infectious disease can seal up the entire ark? We also need to activate the separation wall. Let me tell you, I'm afraid the Alphas didn't break in. The young man suddenly lowered his voice. This is what another group of ruin hunters just said. They said that there have been major discoveries in the field of ruin exploration recently. It is very likely that the Alphas are still alive on this planet, but they are all in collective dormancy. Someone activated the alien battleship of Yawth some time ago, and it has woken them up. This imagination is too rich. Kaylan couldn't help but twitching his lips. Uncle, which hunter did you hear such alarmist statements from? This is simply spreading rumors. There will be bonuses for reporting. Here, there are a few ruin hunters over there wearing scent-colored camouflage uniforms, sitting together. I heard that they are members of a large hunting group. The middle-aged man pointed to a dozen people sitting not far away. They were discussing something nervously, while the group of people nearby who were listening to their discussion all looked nervous. Kaylan and 33 looked at each other. They ignored the middle-aged man who wanted to continue talking. They stood up and walked over, squatting down outside the circle of the group of ruin hunters. The ruin hunters immediately noticed Kaylan and 33 approaching. At this time, 33 was still wearing a casual suit stained with oil, but it was Ian's combat uniform that aroused their interest. A lean boy who looked less than 20 years old raised his chin at Kaylan and asked, "Hey, that one over there, are you a mercenary?" "No, I am a hunter, a relic hunter," Kaylan replied. "Ha, colleagues, it's a pleasure to meet you." Hearing Ian's reply, a tall man nearby moved his butt slightly, leaving a little space in the circle, and motioned for Kaylan to join the discussion. "Brother, which hunting group are you from?" the lean boy asked again. "I didn't join the hunting group, I worked alone." "Oh, it turned out to be a lone hunter." An obvious look of disappointment flashed in the lean boy's eyes, but he quickly returned to his original expression, pretending to be enthusiastic, and asked Kaylan, "Brother, how did you get caught?" "Brought here. I was shopping with friends for dinner, and suddenly we encountered a blockade. A group of soldiers we met brought us here," Kaylan briefly narrated, and then directly cut the topic to the core of the problem. "I just heard over there an uncle said, do you know the reason for this ship-wide blockade?" "Ah, well." The lean boy seemed to want to show off, deliberately pondering for a moment, and then said in a very low voice, "Actually, it doesn't mean that he knows, we just caught a little bit of rumors." "A little bit of news? What kind of news?" Kaylan asked immediately. "Right now, outside the Ark, there is an ancient battleship from the Alpha civilization hanging not far away, called Yagonactor." "You should know that, right?" the lean boy asked. "Of course I know. Not everyone in our field knows about such big news." Kaylan nodded repeatedly. "That is the 19th S-class ruins, but it is a pity that it is not open to all hunters yet." "Hey, you don't know, today's matter has something to do with Yagonactor," the lean boy pretended to be mysterious. "How to say?" "I don't know which bastard actually pulled this treasure out of the ground. Do you think the Alpha people can just watch their super battleship being stolen?" said the lean boy. He didn't have it at all. Realizing that that bastard in his mouth was now sitting across from him. "Haven't the Alphas disappeared for tens of thousands of years?" "Oh, that's all made up by the guys at the Institute to bluff people. In fact, the Alpha people have always been sleeping deep underground on the Alpha planet. They are a very special creature, just like the cold-blooded animals on the Earth. It's like they need to hibernate, but their hibernation lasts for tens of thousands of years. If the guy who stole the ship hadn't disturbed them, they would probably have continued sleeping." "Hibernation theory," Kaylan murmured in his heart. This can be regarded as a very classic one among several speculations about the whereabouts of Alpha civilization. In the early years, there were quite a few supporters, but as more and more negative evidence was discovered, this kind of speculation has gradually declined in the academic world. On the contrary, there are many non-professionals among the people who firmly believe it. "Then what's going on with this whole ship blockade?" Kaylan asked with great interest. He wanted to see how far this group of people could go with the story. "I'm afraid you don't know, we have been abandoned by the top management of ARK," the lean boy's voice was lowered. Several of his companions raised their heads and looked around cautiously in case there was a garrison at this time. Guardsmen approached. "Abandon," Kaylan frowned. "The Alphas have awakened, and with the power of the Ark, there is no way they can compete with them. Those big shots have been ready to run away a long time ago. They locked us ordinary people here. In fact, they intend to use us as bait to attract the Alphas. Attention to buy them time to escape. And there's this thing," Kaylan couldn't help but think to himself, "these hunters couldn't be worth 500,000, right?" After the East 9th District incident was exposed, ARK officials once issued an announcement. Anyone who finds suspected heretical believers or missionaries can receive a bounty of up to 500,000 credit points after successful reporting. After that, people called this kind of people walking 500,000, or 500,000 for short. But in fact, there are very few examples of successful reports. Firstly, ordinary people may not necessarily have such a strong ability to identify, and secondly, by the time they discover the true identities of these people, they are often already stuck in the quagmire and unable to extricate themselves. Believe it or not, but then again, we ruin hunters are not the kind of ordinary people who are powerless. I don't think we should just wait to die like this. What do you think, buddy?" After the skinny boy finished speaking, he stared at Kaylan expectantly. "What are your plans?" Kaylan is basically sure that even if this group of people are not members of a heretical sect, they are probably from an extremist organization. In this case, it is better to engage in a round of fishing and law enforcement. In this situation, we can't do anything, weapons and other things were all taken away when we came in. Those soldiers all had guns in their hands. Even if we wanted to escape from here with our bare hands, we couldn't. What if I can do something? The lean boy suddenly showed a weird smile. Could it be that there is a container of erosion seeds among these 500,000? No. Ever since the East 9th District incident, ARC officials have become much stricter on inspections in this area. It is difficult for containers to sneak into ARC, and they will be detected at the boarding point. Even if they use some special, the method has avoided this first hurdle, and what awaits them is a weekly routine inspection. With the deepening of research, now the detection container does not even require blood drawing, and various stations, shopping malls, and districts' security gates equipped with scanning equipment at the entrance can distinguish these parasitic containers from the crowd. If it's not a container, then there is only one possibility. Could this guy be a black-robed bishop? Kaylan thought to himself, is he so lucky that he can bump into a black-robed bishop even in a random holding facility? He glanced at the soldiers in the distance with the corner of his eye. The people responsible for maintaining order in this temporary shelter were all soldiers from the garrison, not agents from the security bureau, and these soldiers should have been temporarily received. Those who were summoned by the command were carrying conventional equipment. Not to mention heavy firepower and active ammunition, they didn't even have a heavy machine gun. Perhaps they left the heavy machine gun, a weapon full of visual oppression and lethality, at the station in order not to cause panic to the people. But if the heretical sect was related to this matter, then the situation would be completely different. At least thousands of civilians gathered in this temporary shelter transformed from a shopping mall. If the black-robed bishop used the holy word in this place, the consequences would be disastrous. Ian's eyes swept over the bodies of these ruin hunters one after another without leaving any trace. In this state, he could not tell which one of these people, or which ones were the real threat. What do you mean by that? 33 asked, his tone a bit stiff. As a retired soldier, he naturally saw that this group of so-called relic hunters was not normal. These people deliberately. There are obviously other motives for spreading rumors and creating panic among the people. Who are you? The lean boy looked at Kaylan. Is this guy with you? Yes, he is my friend. Kaylan nodded and gently touched Sanchezan with his elbow from an angle that the other party could not see, hinting him not to act rashly. He needs to further test the other party. If he can confirm the other party's identity, Kaylan doesn't mind striking first. Oh, this guy seems to have some objections, the lean boy asked warily. It's nothing. He has always been cautious and unwilling to take risks, so sometimes he seems a bit annoying, Kaylan defended. By the way, are you planning to escape from here? Not only do we have to escape, we also have to rescue the innocent people here. The lean boy said. P.S. Thanks to book friend 1610101426233313 for the 600 starting coins. Happy winter solstice everyone, remember to eat dumplings.